Motion to call to order the meeting of February 26th.
As in open.
Yes.
I make a motion that we open the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation meeting for February 26, 2014.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Welcome to the February 26, 2014 meeting of the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Preservation. My name is Curtis Highsmith, and I am your chairman. I'd like to introduce what's remaining of our panel. Unfortunately, Ham Hogue will not be here, nor will Esther Pastor. But we would like to welcome Christina Redding, Brian Brady, our historic consultant, Zach Studenroth, our legal counsel, Bo Robinson, and as always, Antoinette, we welcome you as well. We're going to start this evening meeting with signs. And first application, please.
Aboffs at 31 Hampton Road.
Is the applicant present?
Which sign?
Can you put it a little louder?
Pardon?
Aboffs.
Aboffs, 31 Hampton Road.
Is the applicant present?
Second call.
She was going to check to see about the decal.
Okay, we'll wait on second call. Next application, please.
Timeless Homes, contractor sign.
Is the applicant present?
Second
We're waiting
call.
on for second call. Next application, please.
Austin Patterson Diston Architects.
Hi. Your name for the record, please?
My name is Frank Seabrook, and I work for the firm Austin Patterson Diston, the architecture firm.
Antoinette, can we get that door closed? Contractor sign?
Yeah, yes.
Name of the company, logo, architects.
I have
The
copies
architect's
of
on.
everything for you.
I'm sorry, we have this here. I'm looking at. Is this
Okay.
the rendering that you're proposing?
Yes. I was asked to come down to also show that it is, the sign is depicting our logo, our company logo, so those were the extra photos that I brought with me of everything ranging from our logo to our letterhead and everything else to show.
Christine, any issues?
I have no issues with that.
No, I've seen it before. It's fine.
Any public comment on the application? White background, is it green? Is the
Yes,
facade
the-
of the actual sign itself?
Yes,
Wood,
those-
and the pillars have the, is that a rendering of your
That is the sign, yes.
motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the architect sign for Austin Patterson Diston Architects.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
Next application, please. East End.
Oh, sorry. East End Tooth Fairy Pediatric Dentistry.
It's the Tooth Fairy here. And we won't say anything in contrary to Tooth Fairy, since we
Is
have,
it meant to be fairy and not fairy?
Ferry, yeah,
Fairy.
like the boat. And it's a pediatric office, and it's a replacing
your
sign.
name for the record.
Oh, Jamila Gazar.
Okay.
And it's a sign that's being replaced. It's not a new sign. It's just
This
gonna.
says Teeth Fairy and this
Yeah,
says
that's
Tooth
it.
Fairy. Oh, no, it
No,
says
it's just tooth. It's just little eyeballs in the middle of the.
Yeah. That's it.
Ryan,
I
any
mean, it's
comments?
cute. I have no problem with it at all.
That's not gonna help. This is a true rendering of your
Yeah.
color,
Yes.
font?
Yes.
Okay. Any public comment on the application? Motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the sign, the storefront sign for East End Tooth Fairy Pediatric Dentistry.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks.
Second call for Timeless Homes. Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn the sign application for Timeless Homes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And second call for ABOS. Applicant present. Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn the sign, storefront sign for A-Buffs on Hampton Road.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Concludes our signs for this evening. First application, historic.
John Aquino at 281 North Main Street.
Good evening. My name is John Anthony Aquino. I'm here to represent my family in the matter of 281 North Main Street. As of the last meeting, the board said they wanted to study the engineer's reports that were supplied. I don't know if that was done. Our contention was that the house is in too bad a shape to rehabilitate. Mr. Sudenroth said that he thought that replacing the beams on the floors was not that big a deal. It's really the beams on the sides of the house is what held the house up. And so my brother Chris went over and opened up two of the corners of the house, and the photographs you have in front of you are the corners of the house, and so there's not much there holding up the house either. Short of opening up the whole house to demonstrate what the problem is, I didn't go back to my engineer about this because I thought it was pretty self-explanatory with the photographs.
So the pictures that you've added to the file are your representation that the house is incapable of being restored in its current state? Is that what you're saying? Or should I say beyond restoration?
Well, I think it is beyond restoration, because I think it's clear in the engineer's reports that the foundations and the floor beams are quite old, and there's photographs of those from the other reports, and they're all deteriorated. So now I'm trying to show you that the sidewalls are also going, the side beams holding up the house. So I don't know how much more you want to consider.
Zach, did you have the opportunity to look at the,
Just now.
okay.
Okay, all right.
Any rebuttal?
Well, I understand it's very difficult to inspect the entire structural frame of a house unless you're lucky enough to have the interior entirely.
Got it, yeah.
You know, plaster finishes, gone, et cetera. And you don't want to start opening up all the exterior shingle siding to expose the thing. Unless you were already progressing toward doing the work. The pictures that you've offered show the, which is fine. The joint that the post, the corner post,
It's gutter, so
makes
that's the
to a
bottom.
sill system.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows that there is deterioration of that post up some, let's say, 6 to 8 inches.
More than that.
Make it 12.
I stuck my finger through that
Okay.
post a good 2 feet above the thing. I just,
All right.
okay.
I want to just very briefly describe what this house is. We refer to this as a 12-posted frame house.
Okay.
Which simply means that if you look at the front of it, it has 4 significant posts that define the front wall. There's then inside the house, usually consistent with the ridge of the roof, an additional 4 posts. And then defining the back wall, there are 4 more. So there are 12 posts. That's the 12-post frame. That defines a center door with 2 windows. It's 2 full stories high. So those posts, I'll just go into this a bit because it's not necessary to do a forensic investigation inside the house to know what it is and what keeps it standing. So there are 12 significant posts that support that house. And if the structure were in a advanced dilapidated condition, there would be significant evidence of that from the outside, such as bays collapsing, roof collapsing, that would define the building as being truly beyond structural repair. And I would simply suggest that 1 or 2 or 7 feet of the bottom of several of those posts is not an indication that the building cannot be stabilized and repaired. Something that these are just observations, because we don't have the opportunity to undertake an engineering investigation of the interior. But something that your engineer submitted was that the roof rafters are cracked. Okay. What I don't know from that, and I don't have the exact, I could look it up.
Which report is that? Lemansky? We have 2.
Southampton Engineering Services.
Okay, that's,
Okay.
all right.
And all I want to point out is that, I mean, that's a serious cause for concern, that a roof is failing. But I want to point out that 18th and early 19th century structures are overframed to begin with. It's just the way they're engineered. Which simply means that if beams begin to crack, they crack along the length of the grain of the wood. They don't crack perpendicular to that. If they're cracking perpendicular, that means that something of great weight has fallen on them and has cracked them so that they are no longer structurally
It's known as shear, yes.
good. So, what I'm wondering is the so-called cracks, these are age cracks, which are reflective of wood advancing in age and drying out, and you get a pattern of cracking that is consistent with the line of the growth of the tree, which does not in any way compromise the structural capability of the
Well, it does, but not as bad as.
Well, that does not.
as bad, yeah.
If it's perceived that there's some deflection, then sistering new 2x10s or 12s or whatever it is, to those, or spacing them in between, carries the load of any normal roof. What I'm seeing in this report is an indication that since the house, and I'm quoting from Mr. Lemansky, many years of neglect have left this house in a state of rot, dry rot, and near collapse. I would take exception to the expression near collapse, but the point is the years of neglect. So if there's a roof covering which is letting light in and therefore water in, well, it needs a new roof covering. Most people who own houses, new or old, manage to replace the roof covering from time to time to keep the water from coming in. And so I don't see, from a description of the condition of this house in its present state, that it's beyond repair by any means. I think that's a great exaggeration. And I think similarly, there is some indication that certain normal repairs could have taken place over the years, which have not.
That's a moot point. Is it
I
not?
don't know if it's moot.
Well, of course it is.
Your engineer has said many years of neglect
Okay.
have left this house in a state of.
We rebuilt that house in 1969, 1970, and then that was the last significant work that was done there.
Okay. All I'm saying is that the structural evidence that's been presented here, including these recent photographs that indicate that there is rot to the sill system, there is deterioration to the post that's seated at that corner, that in and of itself is not an indication that the structure can't be repaired. That's what people do with wooden buildings when they've wicked up water from the masonry.
How far does the repair go before you replace everything in the house? This is what, I mean, given an unlimited budget,
Yeah.
anything can be fixed.
Correct.
Anything can be fixed.
Mhm.
I think this is beyond reasonable to ask that
It's a
this
different
be
procedure.
repaired.
It's
Excuse
a
me?
different procedure. Now you're getting into cost. You're getting into cost. and
Well,
that's-
no, I'm just
Hear me out,
addressing.
Hear me
I mean-
out, hear me out.
Okay.
What you're referring to is the amount of time, work, and cost it would be into repairing it, and then therefore doing the alterations and renovations to keep it as currently, its current state, but repaired. That's a cost question. And then there's an application process that's involved in that, and
That's
that's
a
called the
hardship, which you've told me about several times. I'm just saying that
You keep
anything,
reverting back to the
anything
cost.
could be done, yes, if a house has to be replaced stick by stick, the whole thing, because there's nothing worth saving in the house, then are we doing a restoration, or are you building a clone?
Well,
Is
we
what
have
I'm
not
saying.
presented
Now, your
this.
point with the 12 posts, you are surmising that this is because you're familiar with old houses. But you really don't have any evidence that it is a 12-post house.
Well, I'm
And I
suggesting that
know,
a house of that
and I
size is
know-
being supported by something structural.
and I
It's
know,
not made out of 2x4s from Riverhead Building Supply. It's made out of hewn rafters, which are either oak or ash. They support this building and there's cross bracing. There is a lot of framing in that building that's holding it up. And to suggest that a foot or two or even 7 of a singular corner post is tantamount to saying the building is in a state of collapse is simply not defensible. It's just not. You know, I would submit that we could go to any number of houses in the village which have been reclabbered and re-sided and re-shingled and look perfectly fine. If we were to dig a little deeper, we might find some structural evidence of some serious failure that has gone unaddressed. But no one is suggesting that these buildings are in a state of collapse. And I would say that if a wood shingle roof on an early 19th century period house such as this has gone unreplaced for, you said the 60s?
40 years.
Pushing 50. So how long are those wood shingles supposed to last to keep the water from coming in? I think there is some intervention that could be used here to save this house. And I'm only saying that the evidence that you've submitted does not document that this building is in a state of collapse. Nowhere near that. There's a lot more holding this house up than maybe some deflection in the floor joists,
Which holds the furniture up, as you said, last time.
repairable,
Yeah.
wood.
All replaceable, I would say. It's
Okay.
not repairable. They would
Okay.
have to all be removed. The foundations would all have to be redone.
But this
No,
is
I
the
don't-
thing,
I don't know that.
because
I don't
we're
see
getting
that.
into semantics. You're giving us, your responsibility is to present before the board evidence that this house is beyond repairable based on the damage and whether it be neglect or wear and tear of the structure. None of the reports that you've given thus far, and our historic consultant, who we obviously hire and we obtain and we empower to do the professional work that unfortunately we're not able or capable of doing. That's the reason why we have.
He's given a historic
He's a historic
opinion.
consultant. We have a legal counsel.
Right.
These are the people that are hired to give us advice on a given application, and it's his professional opinion that right now it can be repairable. You had not submitted a thorough application that would present your case appropriately. The only thing I'm hearing from you thus far, meeting after meeting after meeting, is the cost factor. I don't hear anything else with regards to actual evidence. You're giving testimony, but actual evidence from a licensed engineer, from someone who can say, this is actually uninhabitable, and it should be, and it is recommendation that it should be torn down. We haven't been presented that yet. So until we are able to get that without any question, we really can't go forward with the application to demolish. Trying to give you give leeway here, but we really don't have any evidence to support your request.
Or make a
Or your interpretation of these reports is there's not enough evidence based on Mr. Sudenroth's
My
opinion.
interpretation, our interpretation
Yeah.
is the one that gives you approval or
Okay.
denial.
Okay. So what now? You vote on this, and if you vote against it, we have to ask for a hardship.
Well, that's your discretion, whether you want this board to do so, and therefore you can resubmit for a hardship. That's your discretion, if you feel that that's the best way for you to present your case. Otherwise, you would have to present more evidence showing physically the structure is inhabitable and unrepairable. Do you need some time to think about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like us to adjourn so you can have
Yeah.
another 2 weeks to
Yes,
think about
please.
it? Any public comment on the application? Anything from the board?
No.
Anything from Zach? All right. A motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant's request to adjourn to our next meeting at 281 North Main Street, Chautauquas.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next application, please.
Elizabeth John Key, Farrow Building, 483 Hill Street. Sorry.
It's okay.
For the applicant, my name is John Bennett. This is the first time appearing on this matter. I was asked to represent the applicant. I've tried to familiarize myself as much as possible with what appears to me a rather unnecessarily extended set of hearings. This process started on November 9th of last year with the filing of a building permit application for a conforming house, conforming with the FAR, conforming with height requirements, et cetera, on a flag lot. And the first hearing was December 11th. That was 2.5 months ago. I have for the board additional copies of some things which Lynn Mahana from Farrow Building put in the file. So I just wanted to have copies submitted so that everyone has a copy. Actually, give me the top one if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. I think the board has been overly patient with the objecting neighbors on this, and I'm going to ask you to move this along after I present what I have to present this evening. This board goes to great lengths to try to get neighbors to get together. As one of the neighbors will present to you tonight, of the adjoining neighbors on this application, in other words, the neighbors that actually touch the application, of the 4 of them have given their unequivocal approval not only to the 3 iterations of this plan, but also the extensive, I think, more than necessary landscape plan that was really authored primarily, the landscape plan I'm talking about now was really authored primarily by the neighbors, which not only talks about preservation of substantial existing trees on the property, but as one observer said, essentially the planting of Sherwood Forest along the borderline. There have been 3 iterations of this plan, and I want you to see that's at the back. I think it's the second to last page of the handout. The house started at 31 3 1/4 in terms of height. Then the ridge line was pretty much at the same height throughout the length of the house. Then, primarily as a result of board comments, the house dropped to 30 feet with a lower ridge line along the area of the garage, which has some living quarters over it. And now the 3rd iteration, which I believe was given to you about a week in advance of this meeting, the house is now the main portion of the house is now at 28 feet 3 inches, with the house portion that is the living quarters over the garage at 27 feet 3 inches. You're all aware of the fact that this is a lot that is not in a flood zone, so you take the height, your jumping off point for the height is from naturally occurring grade. It is, as a matter of right, the applicant could build a house that's 35 feet tall. And 2.5 stories. This is a 2-story house, which is currently at 28 feet 3 inches on the main portion, and 27 feet 3 inches on the portion that is over the garage. And again, that was at the
Is this the
request
scale?
of the board. Excuse me, that's the scale. Yes. Okay, so those are the 3 iterations on the back. Okay. The first proposal you can see that from the first and the second proposal, the square footage of the house remained the same, but the house shrunk in terms
Yeah.
of height.
Took away one of the bays.
I'm sorry.
That's huge.
The third proposal, okay, which is what you have before you now, is a proposed gross floor area of 5,531 square feet. That is 2,079 square feet. 2,079 square feet below the allowed gross floor area coverage. This is so far from aggressive. It's ridiculous, literally ridiculous, that the neighbors have a problem with the size of this house. It's rather embarrassing, I think. 2,079 square feet. That's a large ranch house below the square footage allowed. And by the way, there's been a lot of talk about the character of the neighborhood and the size of the houses in the neighborhood. You understand, this is not a zoning board of appeals. The size of the houses in the area is irrelevant, legally irrelevant. It has nothing to do with your consideration.
How that size impacts visually does. You can
But the size of the
You
houses.
can have 6,000 square
Scale
foot
is relevant.
look
Well,
various ways.
I know you guys are well aware of this, but some of the neighbors may not be aware.
I have to challenge the question, the statement you made. That's the reason why I.
Okay, well, we can disagree about that. In any event, you're all aware of the Ferrara case in which the Supreme Court, in a case that we litigated against this board, said the size of the structure was not a factor mentioned in the enabling statute. As petitioner notes, that regulating the size of the dwellings is the duty of the building department, pursuant to the zoning code. And there, the respondent board went beyond the scope of its authority in denying that application. That was an application that was right at the FAR. This is 2,000 square feet below the FAR. So he's taking 2,000 square feet off of his as of right FAR. So maybe the opponents may not have been aware of this law. And also there were some claims about where to site the house on the property. And again, I'm scratching my head saying, why would an objector or a lawyer even argue that? Because as the Ferrara case states, that this board has absolutely no site plan authority, none whatsoever, despite the fact that in any event the house is located in the middle of the property and well in excess of the required setback. But you don't have any site plan authority, nevertheless, there's no site plan authority here. So the square footage of the adjoining houses are legally irrelevant. Then there was some claim by one of the counsel in the tapes that I watched that you should be including the basement. Well, again, that's legally irrelevant as a matter of law. Section 116.17.1A1 of the Village Code says that you do not include the area of a basement or cellar in the gross floor area calculation. Similarly, the floor area of a garage is not included. That's 116.17.14B. So again, you've been presented with a lot of arguments that are simply legally irrelevant. Let me talk to you about jurisdiction as a historic review board. Obviously, sitting as the architectural review board, you have the right to review the architecture and style of the house. But this is sitting as a historic review board in the historic district. This is on a flag lot. The front of the house is 287 feet from the street. You'll all remember the Calder decision. It was Don Calder's house off of First Neck, I believe. One criterion of and this I'm reading from the board's. This is the board's language. One criterion of the jurisdiction of this board sitting as the historic review board is that the project be visible from a public street, right-of-way, or park open to the public. Now, Ms. Missett's house is on a private road, so that doesn't count. The only public thoroughfare is Hill Street. And I submit to you, and there's photographic evidence in the record, that this house is not visible. The site isn't visible. It's a flag lot. It's 200 feet. It's 267 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, that's almost a football field away. So my position would be, and I think it's supported by your own decisions, that as a historic, reviewing matters in the historic district, you don't have any jurisdiction. And any criteria that you might apply in the historic district is simply irrelevant because you don't have any jurisdiction. Clearly you have jurisdiction as an architectural review board for the construction of any single-family residence. And I suggest to you, this is a shingle style. It's a broad term, I know, but it's a shingle style house. Cedar shingle trim, white trim, very much in the Hamptons vernacular. You may not like it because it's a Farrell house. The objectants may not like it because it happens to be a Farrell house, but it is nevertheless clearly
I
within
don't
the
think
east
this
end of
board is
Vancouver.
prejudiced by any builder or developer.
I don't think you are. I really meant more my comments towards the opposition. But shingle style house, double frame windows, very typical east end with the 3/3 above and the one solid pane below it. And we've tried to lower, at the board's request, the area over the garage so that it looks like an addition, or it's subservient because it does essentially house an accessory use. So we've been very, very, very aware and responsive to all the board's requests. I think that unless the front porch, let me tell you some more of the design changes in the house. Number 3, which again is the third iteration of this house, all well under 2,000 square feet under this, the GFA, almost 7 feet under the height. The front porch is 2 feet narrower. We've eliminated 2 columns in the transom from the front porch, all trying to make it just simpler. It's a smaller scale and size of all front windows. Overall height of the house and garage was reduced. A 3-car garage was reduced to a 2-car garage. We further reduced the square feet by another 195 square feet. We eliminated the roof pop-up over the upper window. We eliminated the wall fascia connecting the house to the garage, and eliminated some of the rear covered porches and terraces. This house is not visible
John, I
from
can
the
have
street.
you continue on and on and on.
Excuse me?
I can have you continue on and on and on.
Okay.
The board liked the design.
Excuse me?
We're pleased by.
No,
some
I
of the
know,
changes.
but I'm talking to more than
I
you.
understand, and that's the reason why we've
But I'm directing my
entertained-
comments to you. And overall, I didn't see any negative review
The
of
only
the
question
design.
I would have is if the neighbors had the opportunity, and I think most of the changes that were made would answer some of the challenges that they've had with regards to impact.
Well, maybe
So,
Mr. Pressman, who represents, or has some information from 4 of the 5 surrounding neighbors.
well, let's
could be
talk
helpful
about the
with that.
people they're in opposition to, and then
Well,
we
is
can
there,
probably
do you
eliminate
have
some
to
of
keep the opposition first? Can't you have somebody from the, Mr. Pressman come up? I think he's prepared to speak. He represents 4 of the 5 surrounding adjoining neighbors.
Understood. I'm just trying to make your application easier. Sometimes you can be easier to rebut the challenges that they were.
Well, I think Mr. Pressman's
Fine. That's what you
testimony
wanna
would be
do.
helpful. But again, it's your call.
Okay.
It's your board, your way of handling your thing. But in any event, suffice to say, I think that, or I would sum up, we're done. We're done. Unless the board needs any other submissions in furtherance of this iteration number 3, we're done. We'd like the board to close the hearing. You could keep it open for written submission and make a decision, up or down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, did you have anything to add?
I can come after everybody.
Well, no, go ahead, because you're part of the application, if that's okay, from Farrell Building.
Hi, good evening. Lynn Mahana from Farrell Building. Just want to read.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Sure, I'm sorry. Just basically, we've come back every time, and every change we've made, we've come with the suggestions to the board. I'm glad you like the design. We feel it is more
What I will say
appropriate.
is that this is very helpful.
That was, yes.
The-
And as you can see, the
aerial
lot,
view and the placement at scale of the structure does give us a better impact. And this is one of the things I think we've asked,
yeah.
just so we can visually place the structure in its vicinity in comparison to the other neighbors and see how
You
that
know, we see it, I can see it on a survey due to the measurements, but as you said, when you put it in the 3D, it's more visibly
Putting the 3D
appealing.
plants up, it does make a difference.
And you can see that the 4 adjacent neighbors who are in agreement to this, you know, it's in proper placement away from everybody, and it will be properly screened. There should have no negative effect on any of the surrounding neighbors.
Thank you.
And it's not overly masked. Thanks.
Do we have a landscape plan that shows that these are definitely going in?
This is the submission of the landscape plan, and we
Yes.
have the additional landscape plan.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is yes. Public comment, please.
Good evening. As you know, I was here before on behalf of there are actually five of us who authorized me to speak on their behalf.
Do you have letters from those five?
Yes, I do. I submitted it last time, and I have an
Okay.
updated one as well, which I will hand out, which is an email from each of them, a recent email since the further iterations. And
Could you just let us know emplacement of the five residents that you're referring to?
yes, so there are, excluding a Jenkins that was a seller, there are five neighbors, myself being one, plus three others. So that would be myself, Reisman, Nelson, Sokin. And the fifth one, who's not in support, is missing. So of the five that actually touch the Farrell property, four of us, per the email support, are in agreement with their plan, the old plan and the new plan, and that's per the attachment that I just submitted. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Please step forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Jeff Bragman, 15 Railroad Avenue, East Hampton, New York. I represent Ann Pine, who is one of the neighbors nearby to this proposed new residence. Ann lives at 449 Hill Street, and both her lot and the lot in question, as you know, are in the Village Historic District. A very significant difference, I might add, between this case and the case that council just cited, the Ferrara case, which was not in the historic district. Ms. Pine has three lots in the district and grew up in the Elihu Root house and has been a resident for 62 years and lived on Hill Street for 30 years. And she's also a designer with a very renowned design firm with roots in the decorative arts and preservation. But I think you're going to see as I go on, if I can get a little time to go on, that the concern here is not really just one neighbor out of five. There's a very large outpouring of community concern that I'm not sure the board is aware of. Chapter 65 sets forth most of your responsibilities, and I think it's worth looking at, particularly in light of the fact that council has made some suggestion that you don't have any jurisdiction to even look at the size of the house. So I want to just focus on that for a minute, the purposes of the chapter, because they establish that your job in this application is for the protection, enhancement, perpetuation of the historic district. It doesn't say the enhancement or perpetuation of the pocketbooks of the surrounding neighbors or the value of their homes. It says you enhance and perpetuate the historic district. And it notes that those goals are necessary to promote the economic, cultural, educational, and general welfare of the public. Again, it doesn't say of the surrounding neighbors, it says of the public. And then it goes on and says that it has a broad goal, this is in section 65-1A, to protect and enhance the historic districts and landmarks by establishing designs that will ensure, this is in 65-1, harmonious growth, that it will foster civic pride in the accomplishments of the past. Doesn't say anything about next-door neighbors. And it says that you are to protect and enhance the village's attractiveness to residents and visitors. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that these goals are much broader than the kind of narrow focus that counsel for the applicant is trying to get you to use here. He's trying to get you to put blinders on. But the fact is that the code is not written for the protection of individual property owners for their profit or for the value of their property or for individual neighbors' protection. It speaks of community-wide goals. The goals in Chapter 116 are similarly very broad. and it establishes those conditions and changes that you can require as a condition of approval. And in every case, this is under Section 116-33, the ARB, I know you're the Board of Historic Preservation and Architectural Review, but I'm going to call you the ARB. I hope you don't mind. In every case, the ARB has a duty of maintaining the desirable character of the municipality. So it's even a broader goal. Disapproving construction designed without consideration of its harmonious relation to the new, to such buildings as already exist and to the environs in which it is set. Again, very broad, community-wide goals. And it is to promote those goals by approving only harmonious designs. And it's interesting to me that the word harmony is used both in the Historic District, Article 65, Chapter 65, and also in Chapter 116. It's a very important concept. Now, you may not know how to make harmony in music. I don't know if anybody's a musician. But you don't need to know what notes make harmony to know what harmony is. If you think about a barbershop quartet, everybody knows what that is. It's the blend. There are no soloists in a barbershop quartet, generally, and there are no show-offs, and there are no sore thumbs. Barbershop quartet harmony is a great example of what the word harmonious means. It means a seamless composition. Seamless composition. And that's what your code is talking about when it says that the ARB is to make factual determinations that that applications in front of it are of a harmonious character. In fact, it even uses musical terminology. It says that the goal is to create a balanced and harmonious composition as a whole. Sounds like it could have been written about barbershop quartets. And that's in relationship to its several parts and the features around it. And it contains additional criteria that you're supposed to apply. It says that new construction has to be compatible with the character of nearby properties in the historic district, and then it goes on to discuss compatibility on buildings. And what I would suggest is, I think people know what the word compatible means. We use it all the time. He and I are compatible. It means that we can have a discussion, not an argument. And when you talk about a new building in a neighborhood, that's kind of one of the factors that this board is supposed to ensure is happening, that new building is going to have a discussion with the other buildings that exist, not get into an argument with it. And in determining what the principle of compatibility means, Article 65-5C says that the scale of the proposed new construction in relation to the property itself, the surrounding properties, and the neighborhood must be taken into consideration. So again, I have to disagree a little bit with counsel who got up here and argued that you have no business even looking at the size of this building, as if that were illegal for you. And I would suggest to you that if you read the plain language of your statute, it is a mandate that you look at it. And if you want to know what scale is, again, it's one of those words. This is not some arcane area of the law where you have to, where you need a lawyer as a guide to the language. This is zoning law, and zoning codes generally use language in its ordinary and natural sense. And if you look up in Webster's, dictionary, I looked it up in Webster's New World College Dictionary, 4th edition, what the word scale means. It means relative size, okay? A scale can mean a series of marks along a line at regular or graduated intervals used to measure size. But it also means the proportion that a map model bears to the thing it represents, or the ratio between the dimensions of a representation and the real dimensions of an object. So when your code tells you, directs you, that when you look at the concept of what's compatible and what isn't compatible, and it directs you to look at the scale of the proposed building, it is directing you to look at the size of that building in relationship to the properties around it and the buildings that are around it. It makes sense, and without it, architectural review would be meaningless. It would go to the highest bidder or to the most powerful developer who could come in and go, well, I'm within zoning, you got to approve it. Not so. It's not what your code says. The ARB's standards in Chapter 65 and in 116 have to be considered by you. Nothing in the Ferrara case that was just cited held that the floor area ratio law overrules the standards that are enumerated in Chapter 65 and Chapter 116. If it did, there wouldn't be any architectural review in the village of Southampton because anything that met zoning would be legal. It would pass. It doesn't. And it's no different than many zoning laws. For example, you may have ordinary setbacks for houses that generally they rule on where you can put a house. But sometimes those setbacks are adjusted if there's a natural feature around. Why? Because you have other laws that relate to wetlands and natural features. And so again, I have to disagree with my friend who was representing the applicant in saying that you absolutely, the fact that he complies with the floor area ratio or he's underneath the floor area ratio shows that there's nothing to talk about in the ARB standards. If that were true, that would mean that the floor area ratio implicitly, without explicit authorization from the Village Board of Trustees, overruled or nullified this board. It's just not true. That's not the way the codes are written. It creates a mischievous situation, a situation that could cause tremendous mischief because any developer could come in front of this board and say, you know what, I'm within the FAR, I get a pass. It's not so. When courts look at laws, they harmonize the laws. They make them work together. There's that word again. And they never read implicit overruling of another statute. That is never read into a statute as being implicit. If you're going to overrule rules that already exist, it has to be explicitly stated in the statute. So not only is that not what your law says, and in fact, interestingly, if you look at the FAR law and go back and look at it, you'll see that it contains a reference to ARB review in one of the sections. In Section 116-17.1. It explicitly acknowledges that under one circumstance it doesn't overrule ARB approval. So it's clear from the statute itself that when they made that statute, they understood there was going to be ARB review in addition to the FAR. It's no different than other instances that come routinely into zoning practice where if you're not in a historic district and you're within the FAR, then it may be legal. But when you're in the historic district, you have other standards that are not overruled. The scale of this house, its size, as it's shown on the plans, in relationship to the other neighborhood houses.
Have you seen the revisions?
I have seen the revisions. Believe me, yes, okay. I've looked at the revisions. I'm going to comment on them, but I'd like to just first go over some material that I've prepared, and I brought you some. We've previously spoken to you about the house size in the neighborhood. I've now put them in some charts and graphs that I want to give to you so that you have paperwork on them, and I want to talk to you a bit about them. The size of this building relative to its neighbors has been a concern in front of this board. Your historic consultant, Zach Studenroth, has said publicly in the prior hearing that it is out of scale and that it does pose risks of visual impacts, especially from Hill Street. And I might add, again, this is another instance where I disagree with counsel because Hill Street is obviously a public street, so is Corrigan. And your own historic consultant indicated that he believed that it would have visual impacts from Hill Street. And if you walk on Hill Street, if you just take a walk on the other side of the street, it's clear that the fact that it's set back on a flag lot does not mean that it can't be seen from Hill Street, and it will be seen from Hill Street because of its unusual width. It has a very, very long width that is running parallel to the street, and that's different than most of the houses near it. It's because of that alignment parallel to Hill Street that it has that great length, and that, to some extent, I think, should make you skeptical about these numbers that council's reeling off. Oh, we dropped the height from 30 feet to 29 feet I don't have the numbers at my fingertips. I was trying to take notes as he was speaking. The problem isn't merely the number of the height of the building. The problem is that the way this building is configured parallel to Hill Street, along a width that we believe is 83 feet, makes it extremely visually intrusive, even though it's set back at the end of a flag lot. And this is precisely the problem that your own historic consultant is concerned about and
You
expressed.
can see the various setbacks from the dimensions of the front facade that you're referring to, like the garage and.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar
So
with that.
From an architectural standpoint, that's done so that it breaks up some of the jargon of that, breaks up the front facade so it doesn't look so imposing.
Well,
Some of
it's
the things that we talked about and getting the impact a little lessened. So this is the challenge, and this is how this board understands its responsibility. We are an aesthetic board, and as an aesthetic board, our responsibility is how visually the impact of the scale of the subject property will be on site. If it's 6,000 square feet, it can be 6,000 square feet in various configurations. But as of right, the 6,000 square feet is the size that's allowed. So we try to do our best to help an applicant make that design not so imposing to the neighborhood as well as on the lot itself. And those are that's the reason why you saw the variations of design from the original application.
I understand that, and I have to politely disagree in part with something you said as the chairman, and that is just I think I would disagree with the reference that you made that if it's 6,000 square feet, he's entitled to 6,000 square feet, and all we can do
if it's 6,000 square feet as of right.
As of right, okay. Well, I hope that is not meant to convey that if you're within the floor area ratio, you can build that as of right, because that is, I believe, not legally correct, that the floor area ratio is not an as of right number that overrules the other criteria and policies that control the board. And one of those policies explicitly says that you are obligated to look at the scale of the building. And the scale of the building means its relative size. And there are two aspects of scale to this building. One is it's got a much larger footprint than any of the houses in the neighborhood, which I want to get to because I know I'm taking your time. And the other aspect of scale that is a problem in this application is the length of that front facade. And the length of that front facade is not changing much if you indent the garage or if you pull down that roof slightly. You've still got a building that along Hill Street is 83 feet long. And I have to say, we have not yet seen, nor has the board seen, a fully scaled plan of this building, which I think is really kind of surprising, meaning a floor plan that has all the rooms dimensions so that we can confirm what the square
That's interior.
footage.
We have nothing to do with
Well,
the
we
interior.
can't confirm the length of
That's the interior. Okay,
we
let's-
can't confirm the length of the exterior based on the plans that they've given us. And I don't think the board can. I could be wrong. I've done my best to look through all the materials, but I didn't see anything that dimensioned the full length of that building. We believe it's 83 feet, and that aspect of the building is a problem in its scale. And it's quite different than the scale of the buildings around it. And scale is something you're required to look at, and it clearly means relative size. So the scale of the front facade is a problem, and the scale of the footprint is a
Let
problem.
me play devil's advocate for a second. You're in a community with all ranches, small, narrow lots, and you have the largest double lot in the entire neighborhood. Or you do have a right to build a larger home.
I think every case that you get is going to be driven by whether it's in the historic district, whether there are historic houses around. I mean, it's going to be I can't say yes automatically you can build a larger home or no you can't. This is a historic district. Ann's going to stand up and talk about some of the historic buildings that are around it. You have a mandate under the statute to look at the scale of the building.
That's correct.
And I'm making two simple arguments. The scale of the footprint is wrong for the neighborhood, and it's out of scale, and it is not harmonious. And two, the dimension, the scale of the width of that building along Hill Street is about 83 feet. Your own historic consultant indicated that could be seen if you walk on the other side of the street and you walk away from the village, away from Ann Pine's house. It's absolutely clear that you're going to be able to see it as you traverse Hill Street, because you've got 83 feet of width. Can I just switch momentarily here? I want to get through some material to make sure I can get through it all. We previously described why the scale was incompatible with the surrounding properties. The average house size, the houses, there's a pattern of development on the street. Smaller buildings are on the flags, larger buildings are in the front. That's the historic pattern of development. The average size house on the flag lots, the average size, is 2,418 square feet. This house is proposed to be 137% larger than the average house size of its neighbors on the flag lots. That means its scale is not harmonious with its neighbors on the flag lots. If you look at the front lots, the average size, I'm talking living area, I'm comparing living area to living area. The average size of the living area on the front lots is 2,909 square feet, just under 3,000 square feet. This proposed house is 97% larger, almost double what's on the front. That means that its scale is not compatible. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't build anything bigger. I would agree with you that it doesn't automatically mean that. But it does mean that what you build, if it's bigger, has to have a discussion with the other houses, not an argument. It's like a barbershop quartet. There are no show-offs, there are no sore thumbs. And what I'm suggesting to the board is that when you look at an average flag lot size of 2,400 square feet and an average front lot of just under 3,000 square feet, this house is almost double. That is not harmonious in scale. And if you combine the two, which I did, I averaged the flag lot size, I averaged the houses in front, put them together and came up with an average. That average is about 2,700 square feet. Call it 2,800 square feet. This proposed house is 100% bigger than that. It's double. That is not a building that's harmonious in scale. I've got materials here where we've gone through and given you a size comparison of living area by individual houses, and I've given it to you by house numbers, addresses, and Suffolk County tax map numbers, which I'm going to hand in to you. I don't want to do it now, so not to distract, so as not to distract from what we're talking about. Because the applicant, last time he was here, mentioned that he might make a model for you, but then he decided not to make a model. So we took it upon ourselves to make a model, and I'd like to show you the models, if I may. Ann, can you put us the two models here? Okay, that's all right. This is the Pine House. That's the Farrell House. These are both made to the same scale. This is more than double the Pine House. So not only is the footprint, the scale of the footprint, not in harmony, but the width of the house is not in harmony, because this is the way that the Pine House is. It actually would be sort of. This would be on this side.
It's two houses down.
Two houses east?
I believe that's correct. Toward the village.
East, towards the village.
Sorry.
Now,
Can I just make
This is
one,
corrugated.
just for the purpose of clarity, which of the three houses on the Pine property is that?
there are three Pine lots. That's the front house.
I
It's
just
the
wanted to-
largest one by
Okay, just
quite a
wanted to
bit.
know.
Very large.
We have a lot of discussion going on in public. This is a recorded message, application, so we have to have all comments on our microphone, okay?
I know that scale was, the idea that the scale was an issue in the case has been an issue it's been discussed at the last hearing. And I know that there was some discussion about having the applicant come forward, and I think it was member Ham Hogue that said that he thought it might be a good idea if you did a balloon test. He called it a balloon test, which I think is a little bit of a misnomer. I wanted to talk about that. And actually, the board did request that of the applicant, but the applicant wrote a letter back, not from this attorney, but from the other attorney on the team, saying that it was obvious that that there was no question of whether the scale was appropriate, and therefore they were not going to do it. They elected to not do it. Now, what you're trying to get at, what boards try to get at with what they call the balloon test, is you try to get a document that actually gives you a picture from a naked eye view of what the building looks like in relationship to other buildings. That's really what a balloon test is designed to do. Typically, when they're done correctly, it's not a balloon that moves around. They take a surveyor's stake, you get it to the height that you want, and you've done it with it. You get a target, but then the critical part of it is not just looking at it from the road, and it's not just shooting a picture with your phone or using Photoshop or a 3D architectural program to produce a document, because that will not give you what it really looks like to the naked eye. It has to be translated so that it looks like what it would look like with a naked eye view. And a naked eye view is takes a very particular type of procedure to get it accurate. And essentially what it means is you have to use a particular lens, a 25 millimeter lens with an f2.8 opening, so that that photograph is taken with the type of lens that's in your eye. Then you can superimpose a photograph of the proposed house or a model of the proposed house next to existing houses, and then you can really see what it will look like from a naked eye view. And what I would suggest, what we think is still appropriate, is that is the only kind of test that's going to give you real evidence about what you're going to see here. I looked at the 3D view that the applicant presented, and you can't tell from what distance that, if you call it a photograph, it's a computer-generated picture. You can't tell the distance. You can't tell the height. And you can't tell the scale. So frankly, that 3D picture that he's and also I might note, if you look at it, just flip it open and look at it, you're going to see that it's shot from an oblique angle. So they're not trying to give you a photograph of the full front facade of that house. That picture has no value in terms of figuring out what this house is really going to look like when and if it's up. And what really has to be done is that they have to produce a real-life naked eye view of it so that you can compare it to what it looks like in its place in where they're proposing to build it in relation to the other neighboring houses. The applicants rejected the request, but I would suggest to you that the changes that they've offered, they're nibbling around the edges of this plan without making any real significant difference in the two areas of scale that are a problem. One is that the floor plan is so grossly larger and out of scale with any of the living areas of any of the houses around. And again, I'm not saying that means you can't build a bigger house. I'm saying it has to be harmonious and in scale. And when you propose a building that's twice as big as the average size house and 40% bigger than the two largest houses, that it is out of scale. The slight change in location that they've done in the beginning, where they moved it slightly closer to Hill Street, if anything, creates more of a problem. The lowering of the roof a foot is going to make no visible difference on a front facade that's 83 feet long. So we don't see that there's much visual impact of anything that they've done, because it hasn't fundamentally addressed those two issues of scale that we think are the most important.
We have to wrap up. And then just to let you know, procedurally, I allowed you to go a lot longer than we normally do.
I'm about to.
But you're representing a few, so I'm
Okay.
being a little lenient, but we would definitely have to wrap up.
Okay. Chapter 65-6 provides a procedure for you to get whatever information you deem necessary. The board asked for a balloon test. The applicant said, we're not going to do it for you. Section 65-6 requires the applicant to give you elevation drawings, including the relationship of his elevations to surrounding properties. You have no evidence in front of this board, none, no evidence showing you the relative scale of this house with elevations of surrounding houses. And the same section, 65-6B, requires an applicant to give you perspective drawings, including the relationship to adjacent properties. You have no evidence in this record that includes adjacent properties. And although the statute says if available, I would suggest that given the size that this builder is, Farrell Builders is a huge builder. According to the New York Times 3 weeks ago, they sell 3 houses.
No, it's irrelevant
Well-
who the builder. Well, no, because you made reference to it before. It does not matter who the builder is before us, how much the property will be built, whether it's a spec builder or not. This board is not taking any of that in consideration. And I want to make sure that we understand that whether it's sold for $5, $10, or $15 million, it is irrelevant to this board.
I'm not name calling here. I'm looking at your statute, and it says he is required to give you elevation drawings, including the relationship to adjacent properties, if available. He's required to give you perspective drawings with relationship to adjacent properties, if available. I'm merely saying that he's clearly capable of giving you those drawings. That's my only comment. I'm not denigrating him as a builder. I'm merely saying it's clear under your statute that he should give you those things. He hasn't. You have no evidence that compares this to adjacent properties. None. Nothing in the record. And the other thing is that the statute also says that you are permitted to require, it says it right in the statute, that you are permitted to require the production of any evidence that you need to make a decision. Now, this board said to the applicant, we want a balloon test. The applicant said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. That does not mean that your hands are tied or you should give up and say, okay, well, we can't do it. There's no evidence in this record comparing this house from a perspective drawing or elevation drawing or a balloon test that gives you any kind of comparison of this house to any of the other houses in the neighborhood. You can get it. You have the power to get it. And I would suggest that under your statute, you have an obligation to get it from this applicant. So that was my point about Farrell Builders, okay? This is not, I'm not casting aspersion on Farrell. I'm just saying there's a method in your statute to get that material, and that's where I want to end it with you. I want to tell you that we are requesting that you get that so that instead of guessing what it looks like or what it may look like or taking that perspective drawing that is unscaled, shot from an oblique angle, we don't know how high or low it is, get a real naked eye view that compares it to the adjoining properties and see what we're talking about. There seems to be dispute as to whether it's going to affect Hill Street. Council says, no, it can't even be seen. Your architectural consultant says he's worried about it. Let's get a real-life picture that's done on a verifiable basis so you can actually know and you don't have to guess. That's how a board acts rationally on a record of facts, and that's what we'd like to see you do. Now, I just want to give you on paper what I told you about the sizes of the houses. Thank you very much. I know I did take longer.
Any more public comment?
Keep it brief.
I'm Ann Pine, living at 449 Hill Street and owning 2 lots in the historic district behind that. That is, I own 3 lots with my children and husband in the historic district. I wanted to make a quick comment about Mr. Pressman and his 4 neighbors. Only one of those neighbors is in the historic district. They're neighbors. They're adjoining, but they are not in the historic district. Only, I believe, Mrs. Nelson on Corrigan Street is in the historic district. I also just want to quickly repeat, I read your village code. There is no word neighbor in the code. I think it's nice that you all try to make neighbors happy, but that's an afterthought. It's not the first business. I also, in the village code, I understand that you can't make a decision, approval or disapproval, unless the house is visible from a public street or a right-of-way or a park. Well, we don't have a park. But I think it's debatable whether it's a right-of-way between Mrs. Missett, Mr. Pressman. I'm not going to get into that, but I think it is. But Corrigan Street and Hill Street are both public streets. From Corrigan Street, you will definitely see this. It's not going to influence as many people as it will from Hill Street, but it will be visible from Corrigan Street, even if Hill Street didn't exist. I obviously live on Hill Street, one lot away from this. From our driveway, you see 120 yards. You will see. I haven't a display because we offered to do this test at our own expense and we were refused. We obviously can't trespass. But walking down Hill Street, 120 yards until you get to the Janke House and 50 yards up to Corrigan Street, coming the other way. This is a huge amount of space from which this house will be visible. Landscaping not counting, as Mr. Studenroth commented. I have pictures I can pass to you. You can see the gap where the house will be. Obviously, I can't Photoshop the house in. I have no idea how to do that. I would also like to show you a couple of other visuals of, I mean, our office did this, but this is a bit hoaxed up because we did not have accurate measurements, which I will get to in a minute. The great extent to obstruct our getting information. This is.
I know you were saying they obstruct.
What?
You're on the microphone, so you're not doing that.
Okay.
You were having difficulty at the building department receiving information?
No, not at the building department. Excuse me. Farrell Building Company did not provide any numbers.
They're not supposed to. Your responsibility is get that information from the building department.
It isn't at the building department. Numbers. There's no scale on a single drawing in the building department. We had to guess at the scale. I called Lynn Mahara I called her 3 times to get that 83 feet, and she did not answer. And in the recent iteration, the third, I called her again to confirm what the front was. No answer. Okay? We had to guess. The only number we were given on that new drawing was 27 feet high, and we had to extrapolate from that by computer. These drawings are not scaled, and that is, to me, unless it's something I haven't seen, but I've checked both places, inexcusable. If you see scale, I mean, the most amateurish of designers put scale. Now, at best, we could figure out scale. This is 1/8 to an inch. These are facades along Hill Street, along the front of Hill Street. The Farrell, excuse me. This is out of scale because of the angle of the picture they provided. This is about the right scale, but it was hard to balance the two. If we set this if we set this lower, this would become tiny. This was their picture. We couldn't get a straight on. I do have a straight on of the elevation, which is also 1/8 inch scale. So if that suits you better. All of these facades are not visible. These are the 2-story heights. This is all 2-story height. What you see here, this is the 2-story height of the Janke House. This is 1.5 stories. This is 1 story. The Chappelle House is the largest on Hill Street. It's 36 across the 2-story height. Then it drops down to 1 story. So I've tried to give you a sense of the whole house, and maybe you can see the 1 to 2-story facades, and under it is the square footage of all these houses. This is behind them. I agree with that. I'm just showing you scale. And, you know, this is not rigged up by the camera. So you could that's a pretty shocking difference. And it is shocking to me. I'm going to go through this very quickly, the lack of information. No scale on the drawings, 3 requests for width and depth. Depth is 50 feet. That's huge. When you have 83 and 50, you see it from an angle on Hill Street, that's a huge mass. 3 times I asked Lynn. The 4th time I got it at the last minute before the previous meeting. Refusal to do this naked eye balloon test for them or at our expense. Refusal to come on our properties. Mrs. Missett and me gave permission to come on our properties, measure our houses to help them do an elevation. No interest. Refusal to do the 3-dimensional elevations. That aerial that you have before you and is over there is 2.5 years old to start with. It's taken in the winter, and it shows a very lush, lovely enclosure of the Farrells with all these trees that are not on the landscape plan, but landscape is not my issue. But if you look at those plans, you will see you can't see the height of anything. For example, Mrs. Nelson's house is about 12 feet high. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm doing it by eye. It looks as high as this house on that aerial. She's over on Corrigan Street, the second house back. Likewise, our back house is a cottage. It's about 2,700 square feet. It looks huge on this plan. It isn't huge. It's got a gazebo with just open to the air. That shows as a roof. This is a completely deceptive way to look at scale. You cannot get a grip of how big things are. If I could move away from here. This huge complex is us. It's a 2,700-foot cottage. It's mostly 1 floor, a little bit 1.5. It looks bigger than this Farrell thing. This is Mrs. Nelson's house over here. It looks pretty darn big, but it's tiny. It's 1,000 and something square feet. You can't see anything on this. It's an obfuscation of getting at the truth. The documents that were provided from Ms. Kratz, as I said, she completely expunged all comments that I made in this meeting. It was as if I was part of these neighbors. She also focused on what you see if you stand in front of the Janke house. That's not the problem. The Janke house hides the Farrell house, but it's visible on all sides to Hill Street, especially from the south side of Hill Street, because people do walk on the south side and they do drive on the south side. The lowered ridge, the second iteration was a joke, where it lowered between the garage and the Three Peaks, where it lowered. That same picture was on their website. They already were going to build that house. They just made a larger design when they first showed it to you so that they could meet your needs. It didn't meet them enough, thank goodness. But the third iteration is equally petty. It's a 3.5% reduction of gross square feet. I mean, that is tweaking. You're not here to tweak. That's like, tweaking is after you've made the big decisions. The other thing that bothers me about this lowered roof height of 2 feet, I had this happen to me last year. I saw a house being built next to me. It was built 2 to 3 feet over the stamped building height, and my lawyer, Gil Flanagan, said to me, you can't do anything about that because legally in the village you can bring in 2 feet of fill and reduce that height. So you can have your big house, you bring in 2 feet of fill, and it suddenly shrinks again to what you stamped. That is a hoax I learned about. I'm not saying that Mr. Farrell's going to do it, but it makes me suspicious when I hear that 2-foot business. I think there's a lot of red herrings in this case where we're not getting answers. Not only do you have not scale in the neighborhood, you don't have the proper size of the house. 2 weeks ago when we were here, we were all shocked to find out that this 5,762 square feet didn't include the garage. We still don't know. Now, the garage isn't a living space, but it contributes to mass. You see it, and that's what we're talking about, what you see. How big is this house? I want these people to get up and tell us. They haven't measured the bathroom spaces in this new thing. We have no way to assess even the house, far less the neighborhood. And I'm going to say something else, but I really think that the village deserves more of you. It deserves that you look at these things from a professional point of view. I know you're volunteers, and, you know, I'm a volunteer here, too. I'm not getting paid to do this, but the village owes that you look at this carefully and demand. You didn't see any scale on those drawings, did you, Mr. Highsmith?
I saw the dimensions of the rooms. There's a floor plan in there.
Not all the rooms, so you have to guess. You have to get your scale ruler out. You don't see the 1/8 inch equals 1 foot on one thing, and that goes at the bottom of every decent plan. I mean, first week in drawing school, that's what you learn. I think enough has been said about the scale of this. I would like to bring up another point here. We have more than 80 letters from people in the village of Southampton. This is not a neighborhood concern. If you want to know the truth, I'm not going to see this house. This is a people in the Southampton Village who care about Southampton and who like the Hill Street Historic District. These are 83 letters, young people, old people. There may be 1 or 2 people in the town, because I don't know the exact addresses, but not more than that. There's a letter here from Roy Stevenson, who is, I think, the chairman of the planning board. I'm not quite sure. There's letters from extremely rich people. There's letters from people who live in small houses. You're welcome to this. I think there were probably a few other letters in your file. But I think to talk of 5 neighbors compared to 80 people in Southampton is well, it's a joke. And only one of those neighbors is in the historic district, and all of them tend to profit from their situations there. Now, Mrs. Missett will talk about herself. Am I, with my 3 lots, going to be able to build Farrell houses and garage? Yes, I am. If you allow this, you're going to have trouble turning me down. I'm going to put on my front lot a tree, and I'm going to hide the...
Do some more business?
Huh? Good. But I have a better floor plan than you have. So I was also told that I should propose something. So what I proposed was a lot that was consistent with the back lots. I would be happy to have it a little bigger, but I proposed something consistent that is an extremely livable, elegant house. I think when you buy a lot in the Hill Street Historic District, not in the estate section, that's a different kind of historic district, you don't get to have 8 bedrooms and bathrooms. You don't get to have double height foyers, family rooms, living rooms, eat-in kitchens. I mean, there are certain things that the other neighbors have, and no one has those things. No one has attached 3-car garages. I know it's down to 2. No one has attached garages here. This is a 2,700-foot a square foot house matching, I think, the back row of Hill Street. I've done both floors. It's a little sloppy. It has a 22-foot square living room, which is plenty big. It has a 19.2 by 15.2 eat-in
We
kitchen.
really have to wrap up.
Okay, I'm not wrapping up yet.
It's like a 5.
Last week I didn't get to say a word.
I understand, but
What we
usually
insist on,
1 second.
I have,
We usually give 5 minutes per.
Okay, I didn't
per
know that.
speech.
What-
I've been allowing
Good.
it because of the sensitivity
good.
of the application.
Thank you. What
I
we
really need you to
insist
wrap
on
up.
is a detached garage, the garage wing put in the back, and a reduction of this house to of the bulk of the house to 4,000 square feet or less, which is already over. And it's the top on Hill Street, and it's way bigger in the flag lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I say next public comment.
Here's another
We have
illustration.
to be sensitive for time. So please, be sensitive to our time because we have other applications coming after us. Please don't make me take out the time clock. like the
What
town.
do I do with these? They're for you.
You can submit this. She will make sure it's all part of the file. You may want to leave your model there.
They want to give you the models.
We want the models.
You want us to keep the models? Okay.
Curtis, we don't have any, there's no place to keep those models that you're going to be.
I only worry and concern of traveling, how they're handled.
Okay.
So I would suggest that,
Can we just have the record reflect that we've offered these two models, one of the Pine House, one of the proposed house. They're at a scale of
And the camera.
1/8 inch equals a foot. I just want that for the record.
that's why we have a camera.
Are they in the record or are they not in the record?
Well, the
No, no, the board cannot assure that they are going to be around if they're needed. Why don't you retain them, and if it comes about that they're needed or need to be presented again, then
Well, we'll
can be reconsidered.
sign the bottom, sign and date the bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more public comment? Please.
I'm Barbara Missett. I am the neighbor directly adjacent to the 483 proposed house and garage. Luckily, most everything I was going to say has been said, but I have a couple of little points. First, I'd like to put this in the record of what I was going to present. That's my BTM copy. This is for the records. Going away. Here it is. Okay. The extra points I'm going to bring that have not been brought up are as follows. First of all, I got a lot of information out of this right in the building department. I use a lot of it in some of my talk. But basically, I'm going to bring up the points that it's the codes that I'm worried about. You know, that what your codes say you should do. And one of the things is the proposed Farrell building in no way looks like any of the other mainly 18th, 19th, and nearly 20th century, early 20th century residents in the Hill Street Historic District, the majority of which display the primary characteristics of the local historic tradition. The other thing that none of the houses around us have an attached garage. It's not typical of houses in the surrounding historic district adjacent to the 483 property. The Pine House, Anderson Chappelle House, my house, Mrs. Jonkey's house, Mrs. Metter's house, Mr. Selkin's house, Mr. Raymond's house, Mrs. Nelson's house, and Mr. Pressman do not have an attached garage. So I would like to see it detached and moved, as Mrs. Pine has suggested. Another aberration that is the large driveway parking area at the proposed Farrell house that measures approximately 75 feet by 40 feet. This also is not a design feature of the other properties of the surrounding houses, none of which have a driveway parking areas of this scale, with most neighbors having only enough space to park 2 to 4 cars. I also noticed on the newest rear elevation of the house that there is a door that will open onto an upper story deck on the second floor. This deck was objected to in the first ARB meeting on December 11th by Mr. Raymond and me. An upper story deck is virtually unknown in the surrounding historic district and incompatible with and/or to the surrounding properties, and will, quote unquote from this, impinge upon the neighbor's privacy if allowed to remain. Okay, now, I'm going to get a little personal, and this is your code 116-30. The intent of this article is to establish procedures and design criteria necessary to avoid results that adversely affect the desirability of the immediate and neighboring areas and thereby impair the benefits of occupancy of existing property and the stability and value of both improved and neighboring property. I will personally be very affected by this code because the Farrell house, garage, and parking area is now 15 feet from my western property line. That's quite close, 15 feet. It will destroy my privacy and peaceful occupancy of the house. I have a letter from Harold Grant submitted to you telling me that I'm going to lose value. I already put that in the record before. It's in the previous record.
You have a letter from whom?
Yeah, from Harold Grant
Oh,
of
okay.
Sotheby's Real Estate, who actually sold the property to Harold. He said, I mean, it's quote unquote, you have it in your records, and I can leave it here too, that I'm going to be caused a loss of privacy. Unfortunately, thus the value is under pressure and may decrease. It will
Harold
decrease.
Grant sold them the property and wrote you a letter saying it would be
Yeah,
devalued.
well, he's been my broker for a long time, too. It's true. What? But it's true. I mean, you know, if he has to tell the truth. He can work both sides. I don't care. I don't think he was favoring me. I think he meant it. I mean, he wrote it sincerely. Okay, now, I think one of the most important things, my house will decrease in value because already surrounded by driveways on the east and south of my property, this proposed third driveway on the west side of my property, as shown in the aerial view, which is, Ann, would you put that back, please? Seen here tonight will constitute a hardship. To my knowledge, there is no other house in the historic district that is surrounded on 3 sides by active driveways. And actually, I believe that's, here is a plan of the 3 properties together, which I will leave with the board. If you can see, there's, coming from Hill Street, there's my right-of-way that leads to the Pressman and Metters house. And this is the new driveway right there. It's going to be 3 on 3 sides. So, in conclusion, I would like to say if I can find it. I chose to live in the historic district in 1980 because of its charm, history, and with the knowledge that it would remain the same because of the principles mandated by the village code. I bought my 471 Hill Street house because I didn't want to see change, and with the understanding that it might not appreciate it as it might in some other neighborhoods. Therefore, I feel the village owes me protection in maintaining the value of my property from a transgression such as the proposed Farrell Spec House. I believe that I'm in a contract, so to speak, with the village to preserve this historic area for its residents and Southampton Village history. I believe that your board cannot and should not change the mandates of the codes for the historic district in order to approve the application for this house whose visual impact and scale are incompatible with the surrounding properties. I'm counting on you to uphold your role in the long-term preservation of the historic and aesthetic features of the Southampton Village District. Thank you very much. Now, I gave you, I want to make sure that you have a copy of this. I'm not sure you do. Okay, and this was to go in your file too?
We have a copy. We have a copy of.
We have this? We have
Yeah, okay.
Thank
This
you.
is very helpful. Thank you.
We have boxes of them. Please take them.
I know.
Any more public comments?
Just a minute. This boils down to a legal issue. Mr. Bragman thinks if he says, and Jeff does this quite often, and seemingly eloquently, but really he thinks if he says it enough times it'll become true. Well, there's nothing in the code that says that you can regulate the size of the house. The enabling legislation, both 116 and 65, talk about scale, mass, harmony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the court, regardless of whether or not it's in the historic district or not, the court requires that trustees give you some site plan authority or some affirmative grant of authority to reduce the size of a house, and it simply isn't in the code. And I don't have to say this. The Supreme Court, Suffolk County, said this. So I'll leave that for your consideration. Number one, we've done more than enough to show, and again, the claim that there's nothing in the file to show the scale and relationship, its location in relationship to other houses, is simply not true. It's there. This is a true and accurate depiction of the size of this house in relation to the other houses. If the objectants think it isn't, it's incumbent upon them to demonstrate it. And I suggest to you that they can't. This is what you asked for, and this is what we gave you. The 80 signatures, I have no idea where these people live.
Well, why don't you read the letters?
There's no.
No, it's up to the objectant to prove they have standing. I have no interest in reading the letters. It's up to an objectant to prove they have standing. People get upset at me when I ask for the address of the speaker, it's not because I'm going to drive by their house and egg them. It's because I want to know where the speaker lives, because standing, no matter how much people get upset about it, standing is a very important factor before not only courts but administrative bodies. So the fact that somebody, I actually did read some of the letters, and some of the letters are from people 2 and 3 miles away, a mile away. It's essentially was a mailing by the Southampton Association. And I can't leave here without saying something about that. The Southampton Association was formed. I used to stuff letters when I was 9 years old because my mother was a member of the Southampton Association. It was formed because the people who formed it thought that there was too much money being spent by the school district. That was the whole rationale for the formation of the Southampton Association. I would suggest to you that if some of the founding members knew that the Southampton, please let me finish, I can make my record. It's totally relevant. I would suggest to you that if some of the founding members of the Southampton Association knew that their organization was being used to deny the right to build a conforming house on a conforming lot, they'd be spinning in their graves. So that all these was a mailing for the Southampton Association.
The association comes before us.
Because, no, I'm talking about standing. I'm talking about standing.
Give us a second. What
about
organization comes before us? What reason they come before us is irrelevant.
No, I think it's past their charter, and that does go to an organization standing. Okay. So in any event, I think you have more than adequate information here. This is a property that is well under an applicant's right to build to a certain square footage. Garages are not taken into account. I've given you chapter and verse. Basements are not taken into account. I've given you in chapter and verse. There has been no enabling legislation for this board to downsize a house. As much as Jeff wants to think it and will it into the legislation, it's not there, nor do you have site plan review authority. This applicant has gone and tried to come to some sort of common ground, has come to common ground with 4 of the 5 people who will be most affected. And it's interesting, it should be in the record, that the 5th person, who doesn't object, is currently in litigation with Mr. Pressman. So I question her bona fides. That all is relevant and should be part of the public record. So I would ask you, unless there's something that you would like from the applicant, and as always, we comply with your reasonable requests, I would ask you to close the hearing.
Any more comments?
I'm John Pine. I'm the owner of the house on 449 Hill Street, and I take complete objection to that last comment about the Southampton Association. Of the letters that we've received, at least 25, maybe even 30, have the address Hill Street on them. So we really did try to find people who felt that this development was not appropriate to the village. Yes, there are people who live not on Hill Street, but who have been members of the community for many, many, many years, many longer years than Mr. Pressman or anybody else that may have a benefit from the development of this property. So, Southampton Association, I don't think we even discussed the Southampton Association. So, therefore,
think I was very clear in stating that.
You were clear, but I want this for the record, that this is an insult to the process that we went through to get people and addresses. It's all in the record. Thank you.
Sir.
The Southampton Association had nothing to do with those 83 letters. I spent hours and hours calling people, getting their emails. This is an outrageous assumption of his. The Southampton Association did not produce one word of one of those letters.
Yes, sir.
Jeff Bragman again for the Pines. I just wanted to say, it's not wishing, hoping, wanting. When I stated that there is an obligation of the board to look at the scale in relationship to neighboring properties, it's section 65-5C2, which requires the board, in considering the principle of compatibility, to consider the scale of the proposed new construction in relationship to the property itself, surrounding properties in the neighborhood. It's right in the statute. So there is a a grant to the board to do that, and that's why 65-6 in its procedures requires and says that an application shall contain elevation drawings including the relationship to adjacent properties and perspective drawings including the relationship to adjacent properties, which is why we're asking the board to get that information so it can really see what's going on here. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Zach, anything further? Your name came up on a few.
No.
You sure you had no rebuttals? Board members, anything further? Brian, comments?
Sure. I applaud the Farrell Group for what they did with the design. I think the tweaks, as they were called, are really more than tweaks. I think they've really, especially reducing the size of the garage and lowering the whole thing down, and even the little details like getting rid of the picture window at the front entrance and bringing that scale down, and makes it look less like, a McMansion, if people want to call it that. The fact that the dormer in the garage is sitting in the roof now, that makes it feel more like an addition. I think you did a great job at breaking down the scale of it. In terms of all the rebuttal, I think your model is very helpful. But you can see the size of this house it's not as tall as the house next door. And in terms of harmonious language and talking to each other, the gable of the historic house is very much in keeping with the scale of the gables of the Farrell house. So I think they could talk to each other very well. I don't have a problem with it.
They're speaking to each other well?
Look at it. They're talking to each other right now.
There's a symphony going on, or barbershop quartet?
But you're talking about scale
Speaking from an
of
by the
gables.
way, if you were referring to skill set, speaking as an architect,
right,
licensed architect on our board, as well as a historic consultant, and so we do have skill sets on this board, which I think, unlike other boards, give us a little bit of a benefit.
I feel I appreciate the changes that have been made to the design. I have concerns about the scale of this house on this particular lot. I feel a little bit as if I haven't done my job because there's been some health issues in my family. I haven't really visited the site or looked at what's been going on there. So right now I have some concerns about the scale.
You've made 3 variations in going through this change based on recommendations of a scattered board, but still equipped board to give recommendations. I would have rather the garage been detached. However, since it is recessed, it is shown. I don't think it's so obtrusive that it is offensive. I think that the height of the roof is now in keeping, as well as the slope. I'm glad that you've pushed back a little bit of the end gable, which is more adjacent to, I think it was your property. I think that was a major concern with her. I do have a challenge with the second-story deck and the ability of that second-story deck to basically hinder other properties. So I would need to see something more visual as to what the impact of that second-story deck would be to the adjacent property.
If we were to remove it?
Just take it out.
Well, if you were to remove it, then I would have no objection. But it seems that you don't have a quorum this evening.
Oh, well, it's in the historic district, you need a written decision anyway, don't you?
However, we don't know that.
Maybe it isn't, I don't know.
It is an historic district, but as of right now, you don't have a quorum to yes,
No, I
no, or
understand.
indifferent. So until we have a full board of members who visually feel or will represent themselves as being a approval of this application, unfortunately, we can't do that this
No, I
evening.
understand. Well,
You
I-
do have 2 votes.
Okay.
Whether you have a third, I don't know.
AJ, does it require a written decision anyway?
It does require a written
Yes,
decision.
but there needs
We
to
don't-
be a vote on a written decision, and so I think what Curtis is saying is that.
Well, you can have a vote the
there-
next time.
That's true.
You can have a vote based upon, you can write it.
You can ask this board to close it,
Yeah, I'd like you to
but it
close
won't be closed for written decision. It would be closed for public comment.
Sure, yeah, I'd like it to be
And
closed.
if that's what you're
This is
requesting.
like the third-
So I'm sure that, because I see hands up, their comments are going to rebut or at least
It's your
I understand that, but let's hear what the comments are, and we'll move on from there. Yes, sir.
I'm Jeff Bragman again for Ann Pine. I would object to the record being closed, particularly if he's going to change the plan. I think we have a right to see the plan as changed before this record is closed. And I think the board actually, I think it's prudent that the board
What plan's being changed?
Well, I think they're going to take a deck out on the roof.
Move a door and put a window there.
Nothing in regard,
But that doesn't
I
affect
would
the
object-
plan.
Exactly.
No.
It doesn't affect the square footage or
I would
location.
Let the rebuttal.
I'd object to the record closing until the board has a final plan. I think we have a right to see the final plan, whether it's a window, door, or dormer that changes. I think that we're entitled to see a finished plan from this applicant, so I'd object to you closing it. And I might add, I know in the background you have a time limit on deciding, and I think there's a time limit that the board has within which it would decide. And if they're making a change now, I wouldn't want to see the board get trapped into a situation where the applicant could come in and say, well, you know what, you failed to decide this case within the time limit, so I get an automatic approval. He's changing the application tonight or
Well, actually, just to let you know, as a formality, that's the reason why, when I ask an applicant if they wish to adjourn, it's an applicant's request to adjourn the application, not the board's.
Okay,
Therefore,
okay.
it's adjourned into
Okay,
the next meeting.
then I'll stand on my objection that the record not be closed until that final plan is in. I think we have a right to see it as well as you.
That's an absolute subversion of the process here. You've asked that I remove a deck. It's not going to change the plan at all. I'm going to put a door where a window is, number one. Number two, the statute does not have, which would be required, an automatic default approval if you go past your time period, and that's what's required. If you go past your time period without an automatic default approval in a land use statute, it's incumbent upon me to bring an Article 78 proceeding to make you decide the case. That's my remedy.
If we're adjourning the application or delaying it.
But I'm not, the application shouldn't.
That's the reason why this board consistently asks if the applicant wishes to adjourn.
But I am asking, it's different, I'm asking you to close it. And I thought that's where we were going, and I kindly responded to one member's request to remove access to a deck, or to have a deck removed. It's done. And to hold this up for the fifth hearing, there's really no change to the plan. You really think that's going to make any difference to an appropriate adjudication of this application? It's absurd. That's an extreme elevation of procedure over substance, particularly when it's made at the request of one of the board, in response to one of the requests of the board members. We're trying to come to some common ground. Mr. Bragman has is making no attempt here, but just to delay this board's decision. It's quite clear.
I just want to clarify in regards to the back rear porch. Can the covered porch stay and we get rid of the second floor terrace?
You would get rid of the second floor's terrace, you would reduce the railings so that it's not, now therefore it doesn't become
But a covered
viable.
patio could remain. That's
It just
one
would be
question.
decorative for the record.
I don't, excuse me, Barbara missed it again, don't quite understand why Brian, the last meeting, asked for, and so did you, Mr. Hightower, asked for a 3D generated model.
Senator now.
Huh? I'm sorry? I didn't hear what he said. A 3D generated model that would rotate view and show the perspectives of the neighbors looking at that. That's not a three-dimensional view. That is there. It's a flat, one-dimensional thing. There's nothing three-dimensional about that.
That doesn't show a comparison to anything.
It doesn't show.
No, but this is what I was asking for, because this is what I needed to see the mass of the house.
I thought you was the one that rotated view from neighbor. I wrote down, it's in the record of the film.
An aerial view.
I'm telling you,
That's
quote
probably
unquote, I
Pam.
just took it, rotate view from neighbors' properties.
That would be the gentleman here who said that?
It was Brian.
Okay.
It's right in the film.
All right.
The video.
Based on the information
Yeah.
we received this evening, based on what
Yeah.
we're looking at
Yeah.
right now, to me,
Uh-huh.
I'm only going to speak for me, won't speak for the other three members.
Yeah.
Based on what I've seen, I am satisfied with what has been submitted. I am satisfied with the changes that were made, and I personally feel that if the second-story deck is eliminated, is decorative, I'm okay in going forward with an approval.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
I feel the same way.
We don't have the votes for an approval this evening. That doesn't mean, by the way, let's just say for the record, understand this. This is not an approval.
Right.
At all. There's not an approval. There are 2 other board members that are absent this evening, and a 3rd board member who, at this point, cannot make a decision. So it's not to say that you still can't submit letters or speak to the board members, however you decide to do it, whether writing a letter, so forth, and try to persuade them. But right now, we do not have an approval. We have 2 board members who are satisfied with the design as submitted. Do we understand that? So if we close it for public comment this evening, it doesn't mean it's approved. Do we understand?
Well, how did, you're saying further comment can come in, is what you're saying?
Written comment.
Only written comment.
I'm sorry, can they accept written comment after?
Well, you can, but I would think that it's too semantical. I would say if there's no decision, if there's no consensus for a decision tonight and to close for decision only, to keep the record open.
But we're not closing for.
I said, if
okay.
you're not going to do that, then I would suggest you keep the record open for all purposes.
Can I ask something? The law, as I understand it, says unless someone can show good cause why a hearing shouldn't be closed, it's supposed to be closed. The mere fact that you don't have a quorum able to vote tonight, clearly Ms. Pastor and Mr. Hoag are going to review the evidence. They've been here for most of the hearing. This is nothing but a gambit to keep this application open for as long as possible. There's been no showing that there's any other need for any more time to put in evidence. I'm entitled. How many hearings have we had?
This is the 4th.
The 4th hearing on a house that's 2,000 square feet less than it's allowed to be. That's 6 feet less than it is. That's on an acre. One of those houses was on. It's on one of the largest parcels in the area. That's why you have a sliding scale. It's not fair to the applicant. It's simply not fair to the applicant. I would like this. May I suggest that the matter
The applicants,
closed
if the applicant is requesting that the application be closed, then we are going to seek the applicant.
I suggest that the record be closed for everything but written submission for a 2-week period.
Excuse me.
Something that's done all the time.
I understand. Counsel. The applicant is requesting that the application be closed per his requirements.
May I?
Can I speak to my counsel, please? Per his requirements, per his request.
This whole last 10 minutes has been completely out of control. If the applicant is going to submit a document deleting the porch, there is no harm in keeping the record open until that document is submitted, which would be at the next meeting.
Okay.
So that's just as simple as it is. There's no purpose of one way or another thinking somebody is gaining any advantage here by closing it or not closing it. There's no right to have this thing closed. If the applicant wants to request that fine, the board has the power to simply itself adjourn it, which I think you should do. But as long as there are further submissions of documents based upon the magnitude of this request, the amount of hearings that have been had, I think that the fairest thing to do is just to keep it open for all purposes, preparatory if you've got a fuller board next week to getting ready to get your consensus, and then close it for decision only.
All right, so if you're not requesting this board to adjourn, then this board.
Listen, Bo is always fair. That's fine.
Sorry?
I said Bo is always fair. That is fine.
That's on record. So you requested this board to adjourn?
Yes, I'm requesting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn.
To make a motion that we approve the applicant Elizabeth Johnke's request at 483 Hill Street to adjourn to our next meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes, I think everyone needs a 2-minute break. So
1.5 hours.
I'm sorry?
That was 1.5
Yes,
hours.
2-minute break. Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. Okay, Christine, next application, please.
Next application is 436 Gin Lane LLC.
For the applicant, John Bennett. I gave quite a bit of testimony at the last hearing about the impossibility of making any meaningful changes or remedies or reconstruction of this house without coming into conflict with the coastal erosion hazard law restrictions, the federal emergency management agency restrictions, the state building code, and the Southampton Village setback requirements. So this is not the typical situation that you have with a house. Say it was a house in the heart of the estate area where you didn't have these, at least for significant health, safety, and welfare bodies of law that are essentially directing that this house be demolished. So that's, I don't want to go over that because I gave you a letter to that effect. The only thing that I think you might find interesting in terms of the other possible ways you could go with this, and just the impossibility of that is, remember I talked about how it doesn't conform with the coastal erosion hazard area setbacks, and part of that law says if you're going to do more than 50% changes to it, you have to make it comply with everything, and how making it comply with every current standard, particularly the 50% glass addition on one side would make it, would significantly actually change the architecture. And also, you'd have to move it back to comply with both the dune crest setback, but also the coastal erosion area limitations. The coastal erosion hazard line pushes the house back. The house doesn't comply with the coastal erosion hazard setback. So when you want to do more than 50% of the replacement value of it, you've got to make it conform, which means you have to move it back beyond the coastal erosion hazard area. So I looked at this house and I said to myself, particularly with the addition, the late 40s, early 50s addition on the side, and said, how do you move that without cracking that single pane glass? So I asked Davis Construction Movers, without suggesting that to them, what they thought about that, and they gave me a letter that gave us a budget to move the house and glass addition to a new location, which would conform with the coastal erosion hazard law. And again, that would only take care of one of the 4 regulations, which I say sort of mandate moving this house, demolishing this house. And they gave us a $150,000 cost, but they said we cannot guarantee the building, including glass, will not rack or crack during the move due to its deterioration. So it's really not a viable alternative to move this back. So you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. To comply with the coastal erosion hazard area limitations, you have to move it back, and there's no guarantee that this, particularly the addition, which as you all know is single pane glass held together by 2x8 mullions, is going to stay in one place. I mean, house movers are pretty good, but there's a lot of racking that goes on. So so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some additional information on a lot of the thrust of my prior submission on the problem with complying with these health, safety, and welfare laws. But then I sort of want to get right into the meat of this, whether or not this house is really worth preserving. And I think, you know, you can't just say that this addition, this 50s addition, which seems to be driving most of it, because the older part of the house may have one time been a stick-style house, but I think everyone agrees that all those elements have been removed, and there's no notable architect, and it's not particularly a shining example of any sort of genre. It seems all to have focused on this Philip Johnson addition, which I happen to like a lot of the Miele van der Rohe, Philip Johnson sort of body of work, but this sure ain't one of them. This is pretty ugly. This is not an example of Johnson's work that is worthy of preservation. It doesn't have any of those simple elongated cube forms that you see in the typical Philip Johnson residential house, residential structures. It's sort of hard sometimes to tell a Van der Rohe and a Johnson apart, because they all have, again, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's an elongated cubic form. And what I've shown, if you can look at these examples that I've given to you. And by the way, Johnson himself wasn't of the opinion that all of his work was of the same qualitative design as qualitative design. Even his authorized biography, which I've given you a copy of, this Franz Schulze's biography, several of Philip's built pieces from the turn of the 50s might better have died on paper. And I suggest to you that this is one of them. Indeed, I'll give you another article here. The art museums he designed for Lincoln, Nebraska, Utica, New York, and both Corpus Christi and Fort Worth, Texas, are among the worst such buildings erected in this country in his lifetime. So I'll give you that. So, I mean, he had a very, 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 very varied level of quality. Let me show you some of the stuff that Johnson did and how this 1950s addition to a house that Henry and Ann Ford lived in for 6 years, Henry Ford II, I should say. Indeed, he was never on the title. It was his wife, but he lived there. It would appear for certain periods during the summer. Let me show you what people think of Johnson's work and his signature work, which is extremely pleasant, bold, and cutting edge. Differs from this squat, ungainly sort of afterthought, poorly constructed add-on to the Nelson Ford house. This is his famous glass house in New Canaan, Connecticut. And again, I don't know how else to describe it, but has that elongated cubic form. It's steel, it's stone, it's bold, it's there, it's permanent, it's built to last. Unlike this, as the engineer's report said, crudely, cheaply, and quickly constructed addition. Let me go back a little bit about the history of the addition. From what I've been able to tell, both from the authorized biography and a bunch of Johnson monographs, including the Jenkins and Mahoney one from 2008, and you'll see photographs in here of the house that Johnson actually designed but wasn't built for Henry Ford II. Again, that linear, elongated cube, fresh cutting, bold design. Johnson designed this house for Henry Ford II, and it wasn't built. And Johnson clearly was disappointed. He said they didn't have the vision to build a house, a modern house, so they ended up with something that was banal and standard and customary. It was clear that this late 40s, early 50s edition was really a salve to Johnson, because he was very upset that the Fords did not build this house which he designed for them, which is Exhibit C to my letter. By the way, why am I doing this and not an architectural historian? And why am I being a half-arsed architectural historian? It's very difficult, and I respect it. It's very hard to ask a qualified architectural historian to come in and talk about potentially demolishing a Philip Johnson house. It's professionally very difficult to ask someone to do that. But the literature is within the reach of everyone. And what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is that this is not one of his works worthy of preserving. Look at the Leonard House, which is on the north shore of Long Island. Great stuff. Strong, bold steel, glass. Again, that elongated cube design, which again is in that sort of that Emile Van der Rohe Johnson genre. Here's the Farney House, which is either in Bridgehampton or Sagaponack. It's probably one of the nicest houses, contemporary beach houses out here. I thought it was very strange at the last meeting, one of the speakers, there were two speakers in opposition, one of the last speakers saw the Farney House as having similar antecedents or similar design standards or similar, elements from the addition to the Ford House. beats me. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I think, just because of the fact that Johnson doodled this out quickly for the Fords when he was disappointed at a very significant commissioning job, is obvious. Again, I couldn't resist. I put a Van der Rohe in here because I humbly think that he did a better job of this stuff than Johnson. But that's my own opinion. But just to show you how he was, Johnson was very, very, there was a lot of cross-pollination that went back and forth between these two gentlemen, and you can see that this type of house, this Van der Rohe type of house, which is in the same vernacular as the Johnson house, is not something at all that you would compare to the Ford edition. So I simply put, I don't think it's worth preserving. The only reason that has gained any traction is because of the name, and just every design professional's body of work, every one of them doesn't hit a home run every time, and it's got to be something that's worthy of preserving, and this just ain't. So I ask you to take that into consideration. Again, the shingle style, stick style, erstwhile stick style house next to it has been stripped of all of its stick style attributes. The only one that I saw that remains is on the, I think it's on the seaside, are those exposed rafter ends, and that's sort of emblematic of a stick style house. But I couldn't help I couldn't help noting that that was one of the that's an element of the style of stick style houses that was actually criticized. I give to you for your consideration an article about a 1921 group of activist Minnesota architects that were critical of many of the stick style standards, stick style design elements. And they said that exposed rafter ends, full rafter ends, they serve no purpose and increase expense for millwork and labor and are not aesthetically appropriate. So to the extent that there's anything left of the stick style architecture of the house, it's only the rafter ends, and that's certainly not enough to make it emblematic of that design type. So again, I don't know what to say other than it's ultimately your decision, but I don't see that it meets any of the standards for something that's worthy of preservation. The only thing that addition has going for it is a name, and the author of it himself, Johnson, was quite candid about having just drawn some bad stuff. So you don't check your discretion merely because of the name of the name of the author of the drawing. As always, the board likes to see what the neighbors think about the property, and I would disagree. I think the adjoining neighbors are the ones withstanding. So let me just go through this quickly, if I may. Neil Smith, who is at 466 Gin Lane. That's the numbers go 436, which is the subject house, moving to the east, 450, and then 466. Neil Smith stated that he resides at 466 Gin Lane. My wife Gina and I are fully supportive of the current application and wish the owners every success. We believe this can only enhance the attractiveness of the immediate area and indeed of the village. The house is simply not attractive. It's a contemporary, poorly designed contemporary stuck next to what used to be a stick style. So that's the owner of the property at 466. Ira Drucker at 426, which is to the west. This is to confirm both Gail and I have no objection to the demolition of the house on the property at the property at that site, and that's an email form, as most of these are. So he's the owner of the house. He and his wife are the owner of the house immediately adjoining to the west. The owner of the house, the lot, I should say, 450 Gin Lane, that is 436 Gin Lane LLC, the manager and principal, Bruce Grossman, sent us an email today, signed, electronically signed. We have no opposition to the application to demolish the existing single-family residence at 436 Gin Lane. So this is not a situation that you sometimes see where some grand old house in a municipality is about to be demolished, and the people are throwing their self in front of the bulldozer saying this is going to change the character of the community. These are the people that are most directly affected saying, actually it would be an improvement to take this down. It's interesting. Ms. Spanberg sent a letter to pretty much everybody who lives on Gin Lane, I think quite inappropriately, talking about my clients, the Bombers, who are wonderful people as real estate speculators, and I take offense to it. And the Bombers and Mr. and Mrs. Bomber found, very hurtful and really delving into their private business. But she sent a letter to everyone on Gin Lane. I got calls today from people on Gin Lane asking how they could support the application. That indeed was the effect of this rather nasty letter. So, for example, Mr. Barish at 8 Gin Lane sent me a letter that we support your application to demolish the residence at 436 Gin Lane. Mr. Josh and Marjorie Harris, I spoke to them. I don't have an email from them today, but I spoke to them. I spoke to Josh today, and he was on the corner of Little Plains Road and Gin Lane. He had no opposition whatsoever. Again, he was quite busy today and couldn't get to send me an email. So here you have, in terms of the impact on the neighborhood and the impact on the people that are most to be affected, they simply have no opposition to the application. Let me see what else I have. Talking about some of the troubles that we've had, and I think Mr. Bomber, in his testimony, is very, very, honest and forward testimony the last time. I just wanted to be able to back up his testimony with some affidavits that I have from two, probably, with apologies to any particular brokers here, but with probably the two preeminent brokers in the village of Southampton estate area, noting that they've shown the house on probably a total of 40 occasions, and there have been no offers other than for a demolition permit, contingent upon a demolition permit. I know there was some question as to whether or not you can take into account the ability to, what the condition of the house is as part of the application for certificate of appropriateness, and I would suggest that you can. Indeed, in the Near-Meyer application, which was the 40 Meadow Lane application, the board did quite pointedly take into account the fact that the building lacked, structural integrity and therefore wasn't worthy of preserving. And that was demonstrated, I think, amply by both the original Lemansky affidavit, or the original Lemansky engineering report, as well as the supplement to it. This has.
Being exercised. Yeah.
Let me see. I want to make sure that we're done. I don't want to go on too long, but I do want to be able to give you everything.
Harold Grant's in the business of writing a lot of letters lately, huh?
You know what? He's had the listing for 8 months. He's shown it approximately 20 times himself. He's on a co-broke basis with Tim Davis at Corcoran, who also has an affidavit there, and they can't get anyone to make any sort of offer on it. Bombers, as was testified, paid $18,300, I believe, and that doesn't include the 2% and 1% taxes back in 2005, 2006. And the only offer has been $16 million, and that's with a demolition permit. And it is directly related to both the lack of structural integrity of the house, the fact that it would be a phenomenally hungry house to redo, and the lack of total uncertainty of the whole regulatory overlay. FEMA, the coastal erosion, the building codes, and the dune crest setbacks.
So it's your intent to try to apply on both statutes?
Yes,
merit
yes.
as
I
well
think
as-
it's just easy. There's nothing in the code that suggests you can't consider them at the same time.
Where is your financial hardship?
Excuse me?
Where's your financial hardship letter?
Right there, those two affidavits. And
Well,
Mr.
that's just,
Balmer's-
you can't sell it for a reason.
What? No. That's Mr. Balmer's testimony, and that's the affidavits of the brokers, and that's what it
Typically,
is.
how a hardship goes
I
is.
don't care how typically people do it.
Okay,
I think
well,
that's more than probative evidence.
If that's what
Yeah,
your
that's
application
exactly-
is, then that's what we'll look at.
Yep. I really don't. You know, some people, there are many forms of evidence to prove a point. I think that does more than speculative. That's more than speculative. That's real-world testimony as to efforts to sell it. So, I don't think.
Just understand, be prepared and understand that that may not be what we consider to be sufficient evidence of hardship. Saying it for the record because you're.
Yeah, well, you know, do what you will, but I think that's the strongest evidence.
Okay.
That you may have demanded certain evidence in the past doesn't mean that is the unique way to demonstrate it. I think that's extremely strong. That's the best evidence. So again, I think you have a situation here where there's simply not anything worth preserving here. The fact that the author was a prominent architect doesn't mean that this is one of his pieces of work that was worth preserving. It's simply not. It's probably one of the worst things he ever did. So, I don't think that sort of hero worship by certain people should be used to impose such a difficult position and a hardship on my client. I also want to state that in Ms. Spansberg's letter, she notes that the Balmers have made, over the last 20 years, quite a few real estate transactions, and those have always been either their primary or secondary residences, number one. It's totally irrelevant. And as Mr. Balmer noted in his own testimony at the last hearing, he said it may not be a financial hardship to me personally, but it is a financial hardship, and that's the standard. And I thought his testimony was fantastic. It was honest, it was forthright, but it was to the point. A project can be an economic hardship. That's the way you view it. You don't ask whether or not it's an economic hardship to that individual.
No, actually, the term is reasonable rate of return.
Yeah, reasonable rate of return. But
Yes.
thank you. That illustrated my point even.
Can
more
I
eloquently
clarify
than I did.
something? He bought the property with the carriage house for 18.3 million.
Yes.
He sold the carriage house for 14
No,
something?
no.
No?
There were two properties, Brian. He bought 436 for 18,
Right.
and then he bought 450, which had a demo permit on it, or a certificate of appropriateness for 14, and then he sold that. But that was a separate entity, separate piece of property, separate transaction. It was the
Right.
adjoining parcel. It wasn't the Nelson Ford house has a. It gets confusing because the Nelson/Ford house has a carriage house right in the front, which is not subject to the application. That was the Grenville Walker property, I think. That was one to the east. That's the letter of support from Grossman. That's 450. So he bought that for. I think he testified. He bought it for. I think he bought it for 14, sold it for 18, something like that, just recently, with the certificate of appropriateness to demolish it.
Right.
So in any event, that's.
So there were two separate properties.
Two separate properties.
Two separate properties. So, for the purposes of the analysis in the code, in the zoning law, it's like it doesn't exist. Except, it got a demolition permit, but for the purposes of the
The
hardship.
demolition
it doesn't
permit was
exist.
issued before he bought the property.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was. I think
Walker-
Ms. Walker came
State
at that
got the
herself.
permit.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay. Zach, comments?
Well, being mindful of the hour, 9:25.
Still early.
Still early. Just a couple of quick thoughts. This is probably one of the more ironic applications that we've seen. I want to very quickly go back to the inventorying of this property, which was done in 1977, okay, prior to the 1979 survey that was done by Sherry Foster, who later became East Hampton town historian. Sherry did this initial survey on behalf of the Southampton Colonial Society, and I'm only bringing this up because she had no idea that an architect named Philip Johnson had anything to do with this property. Okay. She was looking at the primary residence, noted that there was, in her words, he, referencing Henry Ford II, he added the two-story glass enclosed porch with two separate walkways to the main house, period. So there's no reference in the document that we go by to this later edition, which I might add at that time was about 26 years old. So it's quite logical for the architectural historian that was walking up and down the streets and surveying the properties in question to have overlooked the addition as being of architectural significance. But interestingly enough, I would submit that, and this is not to denigrate Mr. Johnson and his reputation, but I would question whether or not this board would even approve that addition if it were to come in today. Now, that's a moot point because the ARB did not exist at this time. It was this survey that later led to the creation of the National Register District, which was then adopted as a local district, which required the creation of this board to oversee it. But I'm only mentioning all this because I find this obsession on the wing to be a distraction. I don't find any reference to it on the form that we refer to. I don't think it was regarded as being of the architectural essence of the property when it was first surveyed, nor do I feel it to be of architectural essence now. So I find that to be a red herring, if you will. I'm uncomfortable with any structure of any size and architectural pretension that rose to the level of being identified from these original surveys, one being done in 1977 and the larger one done in 79, for us to now revisit, us collectively, to revisit that survey, which is now 35 years or more older, and to question the reasoning for why those particular buildings were included in the survey. We had an instance of this 2 or 3 years ago, and we debated that very question for over a year on a property that stood on Hill Street. Just to point out the futility of trying to parse the reasoning for why a particular building was included on the survey. The fact is, it was. Get over it. So it stands. My feeling now is, what is different now? What are the conditions of this building now which so greatly differ from the conditions of the building when it was purchased by the current owner that would suggest that it be treated differently from how it would have been in 2006 when it was purchased? There is some representation to the fact that it is no longer a saleable property. I don't know that that's relevant to our discussions or to my advice because I'm an architectural historian. I'm not a realtor. But my feeling is, if it was saleable in 2006, and as we've heard, it was in fact purchased for $18.3 million by a willing buyer from a willing seller, I don't know what is changed. Now, perhaps something has, and maybe that is in the economic hardship, reasonable return category, which is entirely other than the architectural qualities of this building. I'm simply saying, on the basis of the architecture, I don't feel that there's a persuasive argument that says we shouldn't have that house anymore. If there's an economic hardship, perhaps that can be shown or proven. We all know, if we read the papers, that real estate hasn't done all that well in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. So I don't know if it's a simple question. Perhaps people more learned than I in this area could look at property values in 2006, look at trends, and come up with some extrapolation as to what the value of something that sold at 18.3 in 2006 ought to be now. I would guess an oceanfront site may change that equation somewhat. But these are economic issues. I don't think the focus should be on the Philip Johnson addition, because that is not essentially the house. That was an extension. It was not recognized as important when the survey was done. It has obviously gained age and interest subsequently. But I feel that if there's to be a convincing economic hardship presentation, that should be made and be listened to, but I don't feel that the architecture itself or the apparent condition of it has been demonstrated convincingly. So I'm afraid I spoke a little too long.
Okay. Any public comment?
If I may, can I just respond to that? The inclusion of the property on the survey is not conclusive to this board's exercise of jurisdiction. To suggest that one person's inclusion of this property on a survey without any input from any governmental agency is somehow conclusive to this board's ability to grant a certificate of appropriateness is a misreading of the statute, with all deference, Zach. Just because it's on a survey doesn't take away your ability to grant a certificate of appropriateness for its demonstration. You have allowed the demolition of numerous structures that have what we call a blue sheet in the past.
For reasons and purposes, and whether it be a hardship instance.
No, I have 3 or 4 in this file that have nothing to do with hardship.
Hardship, or if it was so deteriorated to a degree where it was unable to be salvaged.
No, you've allowed.
Or if the design or the additions over years have now changed the entire aesthetic and character of the
Exhibit A. For example, the McDonald barn is now was Kulakundis, not the Kulakundis house down towards the Shinnecock Inlet, but the Kulakundis house at the end of Squabble. It was a McDonald barn. Zach made a finding that the additions had been so taken over the house and so destroyed its original character. If you're going to tell me that the stick style of this original house hasn't been denuded and destroyed by that addition, I've got a bridge for you to buy in Brooklyn. Another on Squabble Lane. There was another house on Squabble Lane that was Mark McDonald's house.
So you're saying
let me finish. I never put in any evidence whatsoever of its condition, but there was a finding that the additions to the original house had so destroyed the character of the house that it wasn't worthy of preserving.
And you're saying that this is the case?
Absolutely.
Zach, are you agreeing?
No, I would say, I mean, I'm sure there are members of the audience that would be very dismayed to think of that Johnson glass box disappearing, but I would say it was designed in such a way. I mean, I'm looking at the very photographs that appeared in the engineer's report, and I can see right through the connection between it and the main house, and if it were to fall down, it would in no way affect the house itself. It was done in such a way that it's about 4 feet away. So I'm just saying that's a whole separate discussion about the architectural value and interest of that. But I think it was, in fact, built in such a way that you could take it off and you wouldn't know that it's gone. And this compares very well with the photograph of the house that was taken in 1977. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, but actually, that doesn't say anything. That doesn't prove to the contrary of my original point that I got up when I got up to talk, and my explanations. The fact that the property was included on the original survey is not conclusive. and doesn't take away this board's discretion to grant a certificate of appropriateness to demolish it, period. Because you've done it in the past. I'm just thinking of 2 applications that I myself handled, and I've seen others where you've done this. You've said, yes, it was on the list, but we're going to grant a certificate of appropriateness.
But the feature you're referring to that has been added to the overall structure was done when this registry was actually created. So the glass,
It's done about, what, 51 or 52?
51, 52.
52.
Okay.
Yeah. But what's left of the original building? It was a stick-style building. It's rather ungainly. It's not really, in terms of line and mass or style, very, very, very attractive. It was built as a stick-style house, but all parts of it, all parts of the stick style, other than the exposed rafters on the water side of the house, have been taken off and been denuded of this property. And there's an addition on the west side, which is a flat-roofed addition. I invite you to go out there and look at it, which is not the only thing that's taken away from the original house. There's a flat-style addition. So I'm trying to figure out how, when this board in the past, on many occasions, has said we had this house, but then signature parts of it portions of it were taken off, and then there's an addition here, an addition there. I'll give you another example. It was George Johnston's house, right, which is now part of the Josh Harris's. It sits where Josh Harris's oceanfront house sits. There was Johnston's house. It was a carriage house. There's no question about it. But it had been so reworked over the years that this board granted a certificate of appropriateness, and it was in the historic district. What sits there now is Josh Harris's guest house.
All right. We have people jumping out of their seats.
Well, let them jump out of their seats. I'm not done.
Come on, John. John, we've allowed you
I know, because I'm the applicant.
Hear me out now. We've allowed you uninterrupted for a period of time to give a testimony, and we have not done anything more but listen respectfully. Can we allow others to be heard? Thank you. Any public comment?
No. Good evening, board members. Sally Spanberg, a village resident and a historic preservationist.
May I have the speaker's address?
68 Moses Lane.
And approximately how far away is that from the site?
I don't have a measurement.
About 2 miles.
I'm submitting some information again to you tonight, my second submission. I'll be brief. In my previous submittal of February 12th, I stated that the subject property would not have sold for its full asking price in 2005 if it had been in poor condition. Attached to my submittal tonight is the 2005-2006 real estate listing for the subject property, showing that it sold for $300,000 above its listing price of $18 million. This proves that if the property is now in poor condition, that condition is the fault of the current owners. If Mr. Balmer believes he cannot obtain a reasonable rate of return for the property's sale without a demolition permit due to the property's condition, and the condition of the property is his fault, then he has created his own economic hardship and should be not denied the requested permission to demolish the house. The Balmers had the property inspected when they were in the process of buying it. They were aware of its age and condition and must have surely been aware of what sort of maintenance is involved in owning, 1, an older home, and 2, one on such a unique coastal site. They would have been aware that it had no insulation or HVAC then. Nothing has changed since. I would suggest Mr. Balmer is asked to prove that he spends approximately $200,000, as he stated in the last public hearing, maintaining the property each year. Over the course of his 9-year ownership, that would equate to a $1.8 million improvement, which is certainly not evident. Furthermore, in my last submission, I made note of Southampton Village Code 65-10B, which prohibits owners from allowing their property to fall into a state of disrepair. Tonight, I will also point out to you that additionally, Section 6511C states, any person who permits a designated property to fall into a serious state of disrepair, Mr. Bennett says it's very serious, shall be required to restore the property and its site to its appearance prior to the violation. The Balmers have a history of real estate flipping. I understand that they don't believe this is relevant. This is public
It
information.
may be public information.
And I'm only going to explain why I would say it, and if you don't want me to, I won't. It
I'd
is
rather
in my
not-
submission.
We'd rather not hear any testimony that has to do
Okay.
with the nature of their
It's
business.
not a dishonest practice. I
Let
don't.
me finish, and
makes
nor if they're,
that so.
even if their intent is to be a spec builder on this.
No, I
particular
understand.
property. It is irrelevant to this board.
Okay, I only would have mentioned it because it may have spoken to their original intentions of the property, and I apologize. In December of 2011, I wrote a post on my blog, the Southampton Village Review, called "Something Smells Fishy at the End of Gin Lane." The article took notice of the way the subject home appeared to be neglected and was deteriorating. Mr. Balmer responded to this post saying, 436 Gin Lane is a very special place to our family. I've attached that response. The treatment of the property does not appear to reflect that admiration. I would suggest that you ask Mr. Balmer how many times he and his family have slept in the house over the course of the last 9 years, whether he had an inspection done on the property, which we know he did, and there's testimony in my submittal, when he bought it, and what his original intentions were. I suggest that the applicant submit a conditions assessment by someone more qualified in the field of historic preservation, as well as an assessment actually John provided tonight for lifting the building. I was happy to hear that it could be lifting even if some broken glass were to happen. As stated in my previous submission, the engineer on record is not known to be specifically qualified with historic structures. To prove this point, attached in my submittal is a historic summary of a home at 510 Halsey Lane, Bridgehampton, and his evaluation of the same, in which he incorrectly estimates the age of the building by 200 years. At the last public hearing, Mr. Bennett stated that due to current building codes, FEMA codes, coastal erosion hazard laws, New York State building codes, etc., in order to be rehabilitated, the building would require more than a 50% improvement and would therefore be required to be brought completely and totally up to contemporary building codes. This is untrue. As several of your board members may already be aware, all of these building regulations in recognition of historic buildings as, quote, one of our nation's most significant resources, make exceptions for historic structures. Excerpts of those codes are also in my submittal. With regards to the significance of the Johnson addition and with deference to your red herring statement, as stated in my previous submission, a Johnson is a Johnson, just like a Picasso is a Picasso. Whether or not the addition is an example of his finest work is irrelevant. However, I will add the following. In 1946, Johnson built a home in Sagaponack, which was referred to tonight, the Farney House. An image is also in my submittal, which is also on an Oceanside similar site. This building survives today under good stewardship and is widely recognized as one of Johnson's finest works. Information about the Farney House is attached. The addition at 436 Gin Lane, built 5 years later, is identical to the Farney House in many ways, with the exception that it's a long proportion at the Farney House and a more vertical proportion at 436 Gin Lane, with the exception of size. Also, while some have suggested that because Johnson was originally commissioned to build the Fords a whole house, the realized addition was a sort of consolation prize. The previous owners remember it differently. While the Fords had hired one of the most notable architects of the time, they didn't seem, in the end, sure that they could live in that style of architecture. So the present addition was built as a test. As the Fordoon estate was ultimately built in an entirely different architectural style, one assumes the Fords decided modern architecture was not suited to their lifestyle. It doesn't mean it was a poor architectural structure. That does not, however, lower the significance of the addition in any way. Also, should one suggest that the modern addition lowered the integrity of the property as a whole, I disagree. I believe the Johnson addition adds historic significance and value to the property, and the fact that it is an addition, of which Johnson did very few, only adds to its uniqueness. The Pulitzer Prize-winning architectural critic Paul Goldberger agrees with me, and he submitted an email, which a colleague of mine will read later. I'm also including in my submission to you this evening an email from Stover Jenkins, an author of The Houses of Philip Johnson, published in 2001, advocating for the preservation of the property, and a letter from Scott Cameron McBain, a previous property owner, who said, while I can understand the demolition of a property due to its state of disrepair and the excessive cost of restoring such a property, provided that this is a natural degradation and not one deliberately brought about by neglect, I cannot understand the destruction of a building of such age, history, and character purely for profitable purposes, end quote. Last but not least, the last historic structure on Gin Lane was demolished in 2008. That's actually Josh Harris's property, who's one of the supporters of the demolition. Making this a decision I am sure you will make very carefully, as these demolitions along Gin Lane don't and shouldn't happen that often. While you are deliberating, please know that I have written, John submitted a copy of one of my letters, 29 letters to owners of Gin Lane property and others telling them about the current application. If it's at all possible, I'd like you to consider these, to wait to hear from these people that may have more standing and their input may be worthwhile. In fact, just before I came this evening, I got a response from Neil Smith, who is the owner from 466 Gin Lane, who Mr. Bennett says is against the demolition. I'll just read a part of it to you and then I'll be finished. I did indeed email Mr. Bennett to tell him I had no objection to the requested demolition, but I was, as you would surmise, unaware of the historical context. My email was based purely on being good neighbor. If there was no historical context to the demolition, then I would have thought it would have been important for the ARB to take my views into account in rendering their decision. But it seems as if there is far more important aspect to this demolition than simply aesthetics, and it will likely be decided based on the historic aspect. I have no expertise in this area, and you and others are far more qualified than I will ever be to determine just how important that historic context is. From what you say, it seems very important to the village and to the neighborhood. And I do believe that historical preservation is critical and that it enhances the value of a neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more public comment?
Hello, my name's Susan Sherry Clark. I live in the village.
Have the address of the speaker.
I live in the village.
Discretion.
I'm entitled to
It's
the
their
address.
discretion.
We went through this the last time. I live in the village, don't I, Bo? I'm a resident. Just saw him today, getting my ring clean. I have a letter to read into record by someone with far more architectural expertise than I have. But as a resident of the village and a preservation advocate in the town, I think this is really important because of the historic district. The structures are important to all of us, not just to the people who live on the left or the right, the north or the south. It really affects the entire village. I mean, how many people drive down Gin Lane daily during the summer or on the beach? This is a very, very visible property. I'm concerned about the erosion of the historic district, one historic house at a time. 450 Gin Lane, the carriage house from Sandhurst, it's still standing as of this afternoon. I drove by, happy to see it there, even though it has a demolition permit. I spoke of when 40 Meadow Lane was requesting a demolition permit, and now we have 436. And each time there's another one, it sets a precedent. So next week, next month, or next year, someone's going to say, and here are 5 examples, here are 6 examples, here are more examples of why you should approve yet another one of these. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about like a tree losing branches. You lose them one at a time, and eventually you have a bare tree and it's going to wither and die. And I'm worried about that for our historic districts. I guess I may be a naive, but I just thought they did have standing for protection, these homes. So that's my personal opinion. But I do have some correspondence to read into record from Paul Goldberger, a Pulitzer Prize winning architectural critic. an educator. He's formerly of the Dean of Parsons School of Design. He's a contributor to Vanity Fair and also been associated with the New Yorker magazine and the New School of Research. The Huffington Post has called him the leading figure of architectural criticism. Dear Ms. Spanberg, I'm sorry that I'm out of the country and not able to attend the hearing in Southampton this evening. I very much appreciate your keeping me informed about the situation involving the addition to the Ford House by Philip Johnson. I'm sorry to hear that the Johnson addition is in danger. I know that a small addition to a private residence is not the easiest historic preservation case to make, but this one is significant not only as a work of a major 20th century architect, but also as one of the first uses of the style of the Mies van der Rohe, Johnson's early mentor in the United States. And while it is indeed quite different in appearance from the original 19th century house, which I personally really like, it foreshadows the practice of light, airy, transparent, modernist additions beside older, heavier, more traditional structures, something that is done frequently today, but which I do not recall seeing as early as 1951. The deliberate and intentional juxtaposition of new and old, then, far from destroying the integrity of the old house, could be said to have enriched the original house by bringing it into a new and different kind of architectural dialogue. In our time, many distinguished architects, most prominently Norman Foster and Renzo Piano, have made a practice of doing such additions in which the original building is restored and not significantly altered, while something entirely different and also invariably lighter is placed beside it. Old and new each possess their own integrity, and together they create an architectural discourse that neither building could produce on its own. This notion of respects the juxtaposition, as one might call it, is both more subtle and more sophisticated than the idea of addition by imitating or mimicking the old, and, as you know, it is encouraged by the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for additions to historic districts. Philip Johnson was far ahead of his time when he designed the Ford addition, not only in the modernistic style of the addition itself, but in how well he foreshadowed this much more advanced attitude toward the design of additions to historic buildings. The Ford addition calls to mind many of the recent projects I've seen by Foster, Piano, and other architects, and it is striking to think that this was done more than 60 years ago. With best regards, Paul Goldberger. And excuse me on some of those words, I do not have architectural background, so I did the best I could, even reading what he wrote. And I am concerned about the Johnson addition and also the older house. When I go to the beach there, I just love watching, sitting there looking at that house. I like to put my blanket right there and look up that. And I see it often. I see it daily during the summer. So I really ask you to please deny the demolition, which would include both of the structures of 436 Gin Lane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anything from the board? Brian?
I hate to see historic homes destroyed. I think we all do. I appreciate Zach's comments about the Philip Johnson addition. I particularly don't care for modernist architects adding on to historic structures, but we can't say that that doesn't make it important and worth preserving. I would imagine all the neighbors that wrote in support of this were probably looking to have the addition removed more than have the entire property removed. I would prefer, I feel most strongly about preserving the house that's there. I mean, I don't want to lose the roof line, the mass, a gable, the stick style that was there. I'd like to see that preserved. And the addition, I'm sort of ambivalent. I'm not sure whether I would see that could go or not. That's how I feel.
Christine?
Yeah, I agree. I feel the same.
about the hardship application or your attempts of, let me.
I didn't say anything.
Without the bullying,
Curtis, I didn't say
please.
anything. What?
Without the bullying, please.
What bullying?
You have a tendency. Let me
No, I don't
finish.
have any tendency, Curtis.
As-
I didn't say anything. Please, that's offensive.
I haven't even said anything yet. Can I speak?
Yes, you have.
Can I speak, please?
Yes, you did.
Okay, can I speak
You
now?
characterized my
Am I
behavior.
allowed
I'm
to
offended
speak
by
now,
it.
please?
Well, would you please speak in a gentlemanly way?
As I was trying to state before, I am not swayed by the argument with regards to the hardship. Change in market aside, I don't think a reasonable rate of return has been illustrated. I don't see any evidence of cost analysis, what the actual hardship is, other than a verbal presentation that was done last week about how much he's actually put into the property, but there has been no evidence of that. There's been no any bills, any receipts showing the costs. We've seen absolutely no balance sheet of what the actual overall expenditures would be. None of it. Only thing we've ever heard is it's costly. He can't sell it for the price which is currently being listed for. He's getting a lower dollar amount than when it originally was requested, which was in 2006. I would say at the height of the real estate market, I would venture to say that it would not be able to sell as high as it were in 2006. So the rate of return, to me, the argument of the hardship is just not relevant. With regards to the integrity of the structure, I agree with Zach. Even with the addition, it was added to the registry. And the fact, I understand what your comments that just because it's on the registry doesn't make it. It's our discretion of this board to either count or discount it. I'm counting it as significant. Someone physically went there, they took a look at it with the change, with the alteration, and said that it is a contributing structure within a historic district. And I find that to be important.
I didn't say that it was something that you had to ignore. I said in the past you have allowed on numerous occasions, and you're going to have to distinguish this because if you want to stand on that, because you have allowed on numerous occasions homes that were added, and at the time they were added, Zach and you later found that their architectural integrity had been dissipated by changes, additions, alterations, and modifications to it. These, for example, the house, the McDonald Murray barn that was owned until recently by the Coolacundas family, and Mark McDonald's house on Squabble Lane. Those hadn't changed from the time they were put on the registry. So you really have to be careful with your procedure here, because you have done this many times in the past, number one. Number two, there are no exceptions for historic houses in the coastal erosion hazard area. None. Zero. FEMA allows you to make an application for a variance, and you have to meet a 12-part standard. I challenge anyone, and I think I put the burden on you. I challenge anyone to demonstrate how these homes can be rehabilitated, restored, repaired without coming to... No, let me finish, please. Please. It is your responsibility because there are three separate laws, the Coastal Erosion Hazard Law, the FEMA law, and the building codes, the Uniform Fire and Prevention and Building Code, that say if you want to do anything more than 50% to these to these improvements, you have to make them comply in toto.
Which is the applicant's responsibility to do so. It's not the
It's not the applicant's responsibility to...
It is not our board's responsibility to make it compliant for you.
Well, I disagree with you totally. No, it's not. No, you can't ask me to have a structure stay in a given state of repair.
You as a board have the right to deny the application based on the merits and your presentation. What happens from that moment on, whether you are able to or not able to do any alterations, renovations to the property, is irrelevant to the board.
That is not irrelevant to the board. It's not, and you should take very serious cognizance of it, because there
Counselor,
are...
am I saying anything that is irresponsible?
John, I'm sorry, I think you're being argumentative.
Of course I'm being argumentative. I'm a lawyer. That's my job.
You're not here to argue. No, you're not here to argue the semantics. You're here to make your statement and your presentation. And this man is here to make his statement and his presentation. There doesn't have to be a back and forth, give and take argument.
Well, Bo, I have an opportunity to respond to the positions that are taken by board members.
Responding
That's all I'm
is
doing.
different, in my opinion, than arguing over words.
I'm doing a lot more than that, Bo. So you don't have 3 board members here. I'll ask you to adjourn it.
Any further public comment? Anything ready further from the board? Zach? Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant's request to adjourn 436 Gin Lane.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next application, please. I'm sure you do.
What did he say?
He has to
Change the tape.
He has to change the tape.
Okay, we can go.
Proceed.
I like Esther's role. 9 o'clock, we're out of here. Right?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is George Butts. I'm the owner of G. Edmond Builders, and I'm here representing Mr. and Mrs. Acquavella. They have, if you take the original porches on this that we have here.
Could you lift that up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
You take this, and this. We're going to take them all out and put in new fir decking. And the walkway along the house will be covered by a 8-foot wide roof.
Just a flat roof?
Just a flat roof, right. Nice and simple. This way it disappears as you stand in the yard. This is the yard that's the backyard. There's a big pool back there, and there's no way to get there without going down into the grass. So now they have, the sunroom is over here, and now they'll be able to walk all the way around and out to the billiard room.
Not changing any of those doors or windows?
Yes, there'll be
They're adding.
these windows, yes. They're big, wider. They have such a beautiful view there. It's 7.5 acres.
Are they windows or doors?
They're doors, I'm sorry. And they're lovely because they have such beautiful vistas there. And you feel inside that it's down.
This is the back
Yeah.
facade?
Yep. And it's all, nobody can see it from the,
So all the changes at the rear?
excuse me?
All of the changes are at the rear?
Yes.
It's just the additional decking,
Yep.
the
Flat roof.
covered porch?
Columns.
And the columns, right.
You have detail in the columns.
They are, right here.
Typical Tuscan.
You can turn that around so the camera can get a view of that for the record, as well as the other 3
Okay.
panels. Zach, any questions?
I like how gutsy those columns are. It's quite a house.
Yeah, it's a beautiful house.
Yeah.
I did the,
I'm only a little concerned. There is one original porch
Mhm.
area all the way to the back wing, existing as you
this
showed
here,
there.
right.
Yeah, that is, so
That-
that looks like an original feature to the house, and
It was.
that will be abandoned in terms of this new scheme.
No, that stays.
Oh,
That's right here. It's
Oh.
just got a wide doors.
Oh, I see. I
That
thought that
open
was
their
being
own.
taken down.
No,
and
we're just
replaced.
putting the trellis work in.
Oh, I see.
Over the top of, this was open in like 1975. They bought the house in, I think it was like 82, and bought the house as is. But this was not a closed-in porch at one point. I think like 1950, they dug it out put in a crawl space underneath it and put a floor in there, and then walls and everything. But that's, now it's gonna be fully functional.
So that section of porch that's all the way to the other, that?
This one,
Yeah.
right?
Is that going to be retained, or is that going to be replaced?
No, we're gonna take that out, and it's, that part is right here.
Right. And that will be replaced with this new.
Right, right, right. No railings up there or anything else. This way, it's nice, clean look. It's a nice design.
Tom? Christine?
No, it looks good.
Any public comment on the application? Clean, decisive, no issues? I had no issues with the
Thank you,
design.
sir.
The property is located in the historic district, and therefore requires written decision by our council.
Okay.
So we will, right now, basically require that our council prepare a written decision for our next meeting.
Okay.
At that time, the application will be approved.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
No, it's gonna be lovely. This will turn into, that is so beautiful. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn for written decision by council.
I make a motion that we adjourn the application of William Acravella, 195 Ox Pasture Road, for written decision by our council.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Next application, please.
Chris and Renee Liddell.
Hi, my name is Arthur Fraser. I'm the architect for the Liddells. And we actually have two parts to the application. One is the detached garage.
Do you have small renderings?
Yeah, I was going to pass them up to you.
You have to pass them this way. They have to be stamped in.
Is this exactly what's in the thing, just smaller? Or
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah.
and I don't need to stand the same. Right, thank you.
Actually, that's not correct, but
That's not, I stamped one, I'll stamp one more
it's okay.
time. Right.
We can share.
So, as I was saying, it's in two parts, actually. It's a detached garage and then additions to the existing house. But the existing house is waiting for wetlands approval for those additions, so I'd like to separate the application and just deal with the garage.
Well, we would keep the application open.
Yeah.
But we couldn't rule on one part of the application. Will you be able to separate?
Sure.
Yeah?
It's
No
two
problem?
separate, it's not an attached garage.
Yeah, but it's on the same building permit, and same application.
You could separate it again.
Yeah?
Yeah. You could hear it, and then you could submit a separate building permit application.
That's a whole new application.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you were
But it's an
requesting?
inclusive application.
Okay.
I don't see any harm in, if it was an attached garage, it would be
So
different.
this is the new
As
addition.
long as it's separate.
Okay. So you want us to hear the
The detached garage.
detached
Yeah.
garage?
And I'm including the others just so you can see how it relates to the main
Shape.
house.
Yeah.
Okay. Understand that reviewing and looking at the garage in no way guarantees an approval on the house.
Yes.
We're not ruling on the house
Sure.
this evening.
Extending the deck, right?
Yeah. And the detached garage, tries to work in the same gambrel features of the main house. And the owners would like it to look sort of like a stable, so that's where the general appearance comes from.
So there's an attached garage and then there's a detached garage.
Yeah. The owner's a former CFO General Motors, and there's a whole bunch of cars.
Brian, comments?
No, I think it's perfectly appropriate.
Christine?
No, I think it's very well done.
Yeah, let's stay.
I don't have any objection. Only question I would have would be for the inside, and it's not our jurisdiction, so I won't ask. Any public comment on the application? Okay, again, just for the record, we will, the application is in the historic district, requires written decision by council. It is for the garage solely, so the written decision will state that the application that's being approved will be for the garage. Does it require him to resubmit just as an inclusive application for the building department?
You know, I'll check with John Foster, Curtis Hutchinson. We don't have any set procedure on that. It's more of a building.
Since we're
department
adjourning,
issue.
we'll get that further information.
Okay.
And at our next meeting, we'll give you clarification on the process.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn for written decision by council.
I make a motion that we adjourn the application of Chris and Renee Liddell, 259 South Main Street, for a written decision by our council.
For the garage only.
For the garage.
For the garage.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Concludes our historic applications for this evening. First application.
Do you want to take a break or not?
No, I want to get this done. Sorry. First application, non-historic. Christine? First
Oh,
application.
sorry. Gregory Fitch on 176 Elm Street.
Good evening. My name is Gregory Fitch. I'm the owner of 176 Elm Street. You guys have been looking at this project since, I think, November. It's my first time in front of you. I just wanted to introduce myself and then talk about some of the changes that we've done. I actually lived on Elm Street for several years, just a couple hundred feet from this house. I know the neighborhood well. Several years ago, I moved home to North Carolina, and the communications have been a little challenging on this process for me. I do apologize. I know there have been times where you have asked for things. I think we have addressed them in this proposal. The two areas that seemed to jump out the most were the north elevation and then the attic gable on the Elm Street side. And I'd be happy to go over those changes in detail or let you ask me questions, whatever you'd like to do.
Can you go over the changes, please?
Sure. So I'll start with Pelletreau Street, the north elevation, and I heard a need for a more coherent integrated design. This is on page A3. We did raise the roof of the two-story bump out so that the fascias align. The dormer of the roof pitch of that bump out was increased to 9/12 to match the main roof pitch to harmonize. Within the bump out, we also removed the first floor roof detail and the brackets over the side door, which streamlined the look. We also did something a little bit, just looking at the plans again, looking at it anew, we added a 6-foot wide porch on the back of the house, which mimics the look of the porch on the front of the house. Because we wanted to expand the facade, the north facade, give it more character, and provide more visual interest for the north side. So those were the big changes. In fact, those were all the changes. We did add a diamond paned window at the top of the gable, which you'll see repeated throughout the house and also in the pool house garage. But those are the changes on the Pelletreau Street side. On the attic dormer, which is also an A3, you wanted the dormer to stand out more, have a lower pitch, which we've done. The pitch is now 4/12, which matches the porch roof pitch. And we pulled it forward a little bit to give it more distance from the roof behind it. So those were the changes we made to those two areas. We also made some other changes to give the house a more classic, traditional appearance. If you look on the west elevation, which is also an A3, We changed the center window on the second floor from a single to a double, which matches all the other double windows on that facade. We added that diamond-shaped window in the attic dormer as well, as I mentioned. On the north elevation, we pushed back the guest bedroom wall a bit so that what kind of looked like a capital L addition was really sort of broken. It looked less like, the intention was to make it look less like an addition, to bump out. So by pushing in the one-story projection a bit, it broke the lines up a bit. On the east elevation, we reduced the massing of the second-story dormer so that they align with the other dormers in their height. And we did this by reducing the window count in that box bay on the second floor. So again, I'm on the east elevation. Used to be 4 windows overlooking the backyard. They're now 3, and this allowed us to bring the dormer height down so that they're all at the same elevation. We added the diamond-shaped window. Brackets are gone, with the exception of the south side. We eliminated the pairs in that case. We also increased the flare projection above the accent band from 2 inches to 5 inches to give it more presence. And because we added a back porch to the house, we removed the trellis in the garage pool house, and we moved the pool 4 feet closer to the pool house because of the massing of the porch. And one member had asked what type of brick we intend to use for the chimney, and it is Danish blend.
Better design.
Sorry?
Much better design, the
Okay.
chimney.
So those were the changes that we've made.
Brian?
Much improved.
You see the comparison?
Yeah.
Okay. Any issue?
None at all.
No issue. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any public comment on the application? Motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the application of Gregory Fitch at 176 Elm Street.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck. Next application, please.
This was a...
Applicants
sorry.
request a letter to adjourn.
Yeah.
Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant at 153 Bishop's Lane LLC request to adjourn to our next meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next application, please.
Jovan Todorovich.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Bertolini. I'm the architect for the project, and I've been going to represent for Mr. Todorovich tonight. Okay, we're looking to construct a second floor addition on a portion of the house and a 2-story addition off onto the westerly side of the house. The existing house, we stepped the new addition back in to conform to the height setback, the sky plane that is required on that for that property there. So we set the addition back. The house would be done over in a natural cedar shingles.
What portion is being added?
This portion over here. This part here is a garage, which the doors will come in on the side. And then this here would be a master bedroom suite on the second floor, entry, and part of a great room, family room that goes across the back of the house.
Do you supply photos of the house
Previously, yes, and I also have new ones if you like.
Yes.
We don't need to see the interior.
Okay, no, this would just help to clarify what part would be new and.
So there's no changes to the front of the house except for the garage addition?
Well, the front of the house here, the existing is only a 1.5-story house. And then there's a white front porch. So we're shifting, taking that front porch off and moving it to the side into the new addition area to create, so that the living room inside would be just completely, walking directly into it. And then
What's the length of the
the
front
second floor.
What is the length of the front of the house?
Overall, let's see, I got 38, 60, about 75 feet. The property, the property is 107 feet wide. And the current house is actually set off to this side here. So that's why we're setting the new addition inside of the new setbacks and the height sky plane. The existing house is over the existing setbacks, but the new work is all within the new setbacks.
I just have concerns where you put casting the majority of the extension basically at Prospect. So understandably, you want to increase the size of the house, but the majority of that impact is going to be from a visual, from a public right-of-way. So my only concerns are, what's the impact visually going to be from the street? Low impose, probably the longest, widest house on the street, on the block.
Well, across the street, there's that big catering place.
Yeah.
So that's all,
It's
also.
a catering place, I'm talking
Behind,
Yeah.
behind the house, it's also bigger house than this house. Behind our house.
It is a wider lot than most of the properties on the block as well. So in proportion to the lot and to the house, I think it would be within keeping of the general nature of the neighborhood.
I would like to see a streetscape, just to get a visual impact. Because I just looking at the plans and looking at the length, I think it would be, imposing. It would be overwhelming, the design itself as presented. Brian, what do you think?
I agree. I live around the corner, and I know Prospect has very modest houses on it. I think this is going to really stand out.
We had a similar application. That's the one on Willow.
I wonder if Willow, North Sea Road.
That I felt the same way, and I ended up being correct. And it is overwhelming, the design. So that's my concern, that this house will shadow in terms of. I mean, again, we had it. I know you heard the previous application about size. Size is relevant.
No,
Talking about Willow and
but-
North Sea Road, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a way you can create
Taking this from
your
here.
size in a way that it's not so offensive to the community and neighborhood, where you can still have your square footage, but your envelope is going to be different, so it's not impacting the streetscape so much.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why I like the garage here. We had it step back, and we tried to
Well, what
break
about
up.
a detached garage to set back?
And that's the rear. Because this here is set back from it, and we tried to break up the overall mass of the house by varying the roof heights and such.
Don't think. I mean, how far are you from the street, from Prospect? What is your front yard setback?
34.9.
You're right there.
Yeah. The 34.9 is right to the edge of the front porch there.
Streetscape.
Streetscape? Okay.
I would consider maybe even detaching the garage and setting it back, just to break some of the overall facade.
To detach the garage, and what if it was a detached, now, just refresh my, would, if you had a detached garage and like a covered walkway, does the covered walkway add to the square footage or not?
That's it. I don't think so. It's you.
You know, just so that
It
you.
adds to lot
Talk about a
coverage.
breeze.
It adds
in
to the lot
statute.
coverage.
It's
Okay.
addressed, it's addressed in the
They
statute.
kind of put the lid on that too, didn't they?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to
I
that.
can't think of it offhand, but it's addressed in the statute. The detached garage is not part of the FAR, and I think the detachment is, and there's also a special part of the zoning code about that.
Right, if you attach it, then if you have a breezeway, then it's no longer detached, it's
yeah.
attached by, yeah, okay.
What's the height? of the house?
The height of the building is 26 foot 8 inches.
Okay,
So we kept the height down. That's why we didn't want to make it too big, too, massive in that respect. The existing house here, as you can see, we're really not going up over it that much.
And the house next to the yellow house, it's also big house. It's taller than this house. Next to on our right from Prospect Street, behind this house, it's huge house. It's much bigger than this house. It's only that because I'm trying to use the garages, existing garages, as a pool house, and just attach 2 garages here, and it would look nice. It looks pretty.
Well, no one's questioning the aesthetics.
no, no.
In
relationship with the property and everything,
Exactly.
it would not be
You
overshadowed.
heard the word harmonious.
Harmonious, yeah.
I think it was the quartet.
Yeah,
I'm
barbershop
sorry.
quartet.
Barbershop
The
quartet.
barbershop.
Before my time. But
But still popular on the top 20.
it's, just, if you could also do yourself a favor, just write
Do
down,
it.
if you could prepare that streetscape so we can get a visual impact, just seeing, to scale, the neighboring property so that we can get an idea of what the front streetscape's gonna look like when one is driving down Prospect, and now they see this larger home.
Okay.
Place.
Yeah, now, do I bring that at the next hearing, or do I submit it previously before?
We prefer it prior to.
Okay.
So you also, just in case there are any neighbors that are concerned about the size or about your application, they have the opportunity to go to the building department and review.
Okay, fine.
So any public comment on the application? Any public comment? So you're requesting this board to adjourn so you can do some homework, correct?
Correct, yes.
Motion to approve the applicant's request to adjourn.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant Jovan Todorovic at Prospect Street to adjourn to our next meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, no, you don't. Oh, okay.
Lucky.
Okay. Next application,
Good
please.
evening, Jim Hoffman, WAM 76 Leo's Lane. I have small sets for you. I believe the pages match what's been submitted, but
This needs to be stamped anyway, Chris, if it's the same thing.
That's okay.
What?
Yeah, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it.
we have a simple shingle-style 3,800 square foot home with a detached garage and pool house in the back to replace an existing ranch-style home, which is right there.
I know the house.
This is the Leo's Lane on the west side of the street. These are the neighboring houses on either side. These are the houses directly across the street. This one I was just here with a couple weeks ago.
Where second story deck accessible, I see.
Second story deck, yes.
What is your your rear and side yard setback most affected by the second story deck?
Let's see, 25 on one side. Check this. when it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon without glasses, and I certainly can't read it at 10:30 at night, but they are marked on page A1, the rear yard setback from the porch and side yard setbacks. There is no house directly behind this. There is a much larger property, and there is a...
Vacant lot, or?
It's not a vacant lot. It's a very substantial piece of property with a small golf course on it, directly behind this house. So there's no one immediately behind.
With a golf course?
There is a...
Putting green.
Oh.
A
yeah,
couple...
yeah.
It's a couple holes. I think it's more than a putting green.
Is this accessible? No.
I think I'm gonna have an issue with that second-story deck.
Okay. You've actually, one is approved for the house directly across the street. One was also approved and built for the house that we just built last year at 135 Cooper's Farm Road.
The second-story deck?
Yes.
Accessible?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
I would check to see the accessibility. It may be aesthetics.
Sometimes
No,
we
it's, yeah.
Or
it's-
distance from,
Or distance, so the lot size is double. Is it a big lot?
No, they are, all three of these lots that we built on here are exactly the same size. They're all 0.4 of an acre.
I would need to visit the site.
I would need to
before
go and
I-
visit the site. I'm positive that we wouldn't, on the lot size that you're proposing. Unless it was was it recessed?
It is not recessed, no. Could I, as an earlier applicant, attempted to do, just agree to not make it accessible?
No. Well, my concerns now are, you saying that we approved previous applications for accessible, non-accessible, accessible decks.
Accessible.
And I'm under the impression that that may not be true, and now I have a concern.
Okay.
That we're just agreeing to not make it accessible, and
No,
people
I-
are putting doorways in.
Yeah, no, I didn't have to agree to that with the approval at 135 Cooper's Farm Road. But I'm saying I will agree to it here.
he's willing to make the change.
Okay, I would want to go and get a site visit before making that yes or no.
No, but I'm saying I'll just.
I understand what you're saying.
You make
Okay.
it windows and drop the railing down.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
It's still substantial. If it was shortened, possibly, but I want to go and get a site visit and
Yeah.
take a look at that, just in case for some, I'm not accusing you of anything, and I definitely am not questioning your integrity.
Okay.
But the owner could convert it into a doorway, and I'll step out and have access, and now they're intruding on the neighbor's privacy. We want to be very sensitive about that.
Okay.
And if you're saying that this has happened in other homes in that neighborhood, I'm concerned. Because it just means that our approvals are becoming paper approvals, and we definitely don't want that to be the case,
We don't usually okay them in that neighborhood.
especially in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So.
All right, so can I continue on with?
We're going to do a site visit. I
Right.
have no issue with the aesthetics of the structure. As the only question I have is with the second-story deck, but I need to do a site visit just to see overall what's happening.
Okay.
And what the impact would be, even if we were to allow it.
Okay.
Brian, do you have any comments?
No, fine.
Christine?
No.
All right.
So the
This
aesthetics are no
is-
problem.
This is what you're going to see when you go to the site right now, though. That's going to be helpful.
Yeah,
I know the
yeah,
house.
yeah.
I know the house very well.
Yeah.
Okay.
We know the neighborhood really well.
Very, 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 very well. Very well. Any public comment? Okay, so you're asking this board to adjourn so we can do a
Yes,
little bit more
please.
research.
Yeah.
Good, very good. Motion to,
I make a motion, sorry.
go ahead.
I make a motion that we adjourn WAM City.
No. Approve applicant's request to adjourn.
Approve applicant's request to adjourn the applicant WAM 76 Leo's Lane LLC to our next meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
So tired.
I'm exhausted. Next application, please.
The next application is 59 First Neck Lane LLC.
William Schultz, architect, here to represent 59 First Neck Lane, LLC, and I just want to hand out some small sets to try to make it easier and go faster. Property is located on 59 First Neck Lane, which is, it's a private road off First Neck Lane. This property is located at the end of the private road. This is a photograph of the road outside the house. There's one more house at the end where the gates are, and the house that I'm working on is the last house on the right side of the photograph.
This is just the front bump out?
The front bump out is there. We're building behind it in the back. So if you see, this is the road. This is the existing house, and there's a gable. This is the existing photograph of the existing house. This gable on the west side, we're just continuing back about the same size, 20 feet. We continue back, and then we're doing a two-story addition on the west side of that, which is the thin addition, 8 feet by 14 feet.
Brian, any comments?
22 feet tall.
Christine, any comments?
No.
Any public comment on the application? Motion to approve?
Make a motion that we approve the application of, so sorry, 59 First Neck Lane LLC.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next application, please.
Marcia and Todd Capel at Meadowgrass Lane. Is it Capel or Couple?
Good evening. My name is Marius Brisky. I'm the architect for Mrs. and Mr. Capel. And the property is at 6 Meadowgrass Lane on the north side of the street. And we are proposing minor addition to the second story of existing house, basically moving the bedroom from the first story to the second story by extending existing roof. There is no change to no change to the footprint of the house. It's just a second story addition.
You're increasing the roof line and you're adding a dormer.
Exactly. Originally it was a house with attached roof, with attached garage. I'm sorry. Now we are proposing then the garage was converted into the bedroom. However, there is no bathroom, and also there is a concern that they have the kid, which they want to have on the second floor, and right now there is only one master bedroom upstairs.
It's a big improvement.
So,
Brian, comments?
I think it's terrific.
Yeah.
Christine?
I think it's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
Any public comment on the application? Motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the application of Marcia and Todd Capel at Meadowgrass Lane.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next application, please.
Hawks Hill LLC on Pulaski Street.
Hi. Hi, I'm Debbie Croft, the architect for Hawks Hill. I have some, the affidavits of posting and mailing. And I also have a revision. The drawings show that it was a stucco exterior, which is what the existing house currently is. And since we did those drawings, we decided that it would be actually just as cost effective because of the condition of the stucco to put shingles. And when I called the village today, Diana said just to submit the revision in writing and to bring the materials. So if you want to see the shingles, you can, I have this. So this is on the corner of Pulaski and North Woolley Street. This is the existing house, as you see it. There's also an existing garage. And this is a very simple application because essentially what we want to do, because of the constraints of the site, is remove this garage and the shed, because it's oversized anyway for a garage,
and relocate it
Can you hand this to her?
at the end
You
of
are the
the...
licensed architect on file?
Pardon me?
You are the licensed architect
Yes, I
on
am.
file? Can you please just make the hand change from stucco to
Oh,
seat?
sure.
Right on.
Okay. You want me to do it now or after? Yes.
I don't think we have an issue with the aesthetics, do you?
Well, wait.
Christie?
I want to see what she's doing.
Yeah. Oh, my God. So we're...
If you want to give a presentation, go
Can I do
ahead.
that first and then do that?
I don't think we
Yeah.
have any opposition, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, but we're changing it. We're adding, we're raising the roof.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I took so much time to make
You
this.
go
so
right
you could- You know.
Appreciate that, yes. There you go. Oh,
So,
Voila.
so there you go.
wow. Okay,
Okay.
Very nice.
that's a change up.
Yes, all right. So we're
And
just
moving-
we're adding this much.
You spent
We're
a lot
adding
of time
5
on that,
feet.
didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
afternoon.
okay.
And
That's why the
moving that, and moving the garage to the back.
And we're moving the garage to the
You can
back.
turn that to the camera so they can see all your hard work.
Thank you. All right. Should I bow? No?
Very appropriate.
Okay, so,
Any public comment on the application? Anything further from the board?
No.
Motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the application for Hawks Hill LLC on Pulaski Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
shingles. What if I don't get, I think I already put it in once, but okay. Shingles.
If you could set, I'll give you some time to
Okay,
do
can
the
I
next
press-
application. Take the plans with you and you can just bring them back to me.
Okay.
Next application, please.
Hi, I'm Jim McMullen from the firm Fleetwood and McMullen. We're representing 101 Hunting Lane LLC. What we're proposing to do is demolish an existing house and construct a 6,298 square foot house along with a detached garage, pool, and pool house. It is in the shingle style with natural wood shingles on the roof and sidewalls, white trim, also with a stone water table and stone chimneys.
You have a sample of the stone?
I do not have a sample of the stone. It's Connecticut fieldstone.
I know one of my board members is going to have an issue with that, using materials that's more indigenous to Long Island, brick being one. But so be prepared for that.
Sure.
Okay.
It's a stone that we've used before
In the
around the
village of
corner on
Southampton.
Wyandanch.
Here in the village of Southampton?
Yes.
How long ago?
Probably 15 years ago.
You missed them.
Deck's here.
On the second page that I gave you, we did do a landscaping plan. Right now, the perimeter of the property is hedged in with about a 12 to 14 foot hedge, except for the front. What we'd like to do is hedge that front also. We also added arborvitae in front of that kind of turnaround parking spot, so you can't see it from the street, even during the winter. And the detached garage and pool house are also to be constructed in the same materials as the house. So basically, from the street, you will not really see the house that much. Also,
where's the setback?
60 feet.
60 feet.
Yes.
You'll
It's
still have-
actually
you'll
right
still be able
about
to
where
see.
the existing house is. So,
You'll still have a visual impact from the street.
depending if we keep that hedge that high as the same as the perimeter,
These are all about 12 to 14 feet high. So, and in keeping with the neighbors, they have high hedge also, which is hard to see their house. Also, if you go further back in your package, there are two aerials along with the site plan on them. As you can see, the perimeter of the property is well vegetated, also with large trees on either side from the neighbors' properties. So you really won't be able to see the neighbors either. I know privacy is an issue in Southampton, and in talking with one of the neighbors to the east.
Privacy is not an issue, is keeping it is the issue.
Well, we intend to do that, and in talking with the neighbor to the east, we're pretty confident that she is happy with what we're doing and doesn't have any objection. And then the second to last page is the existing house in photos.
Can we go to, can you give me the actual chart that you're on? It's a G1 point.
Actually, it's one of the last pages that doesn't have a number because it's just the photos.
Okay. Going to G1.01.
That's this one here.
Yep,
This one or the flip around?
Okay. That's what's proposed?
Yes, if you can see the lines here, this is the proposed house.
Mm-hmm.
And with the carport, this is the existing house. So we are actually lessening the footprint and
That's the part I was trying to make.
the width
Thank you.
of the house from the street is going to be minimized also.
Okay.
We are adding a garage, but it's back behind the house.
Okay.
So you might see a little bit through the gate of the garage, but it's in a much smaller scale compared to the house, and the pool house is actually behind that, so you won't see that.
Ryan, any questions?
Just looks like there's a very large roof deck in the back. Goes across the whole back.
Across the back, there is a
widow's walk or a roof deck?
There is a roof deck.
It's huge.
Or not a roof deck, but a second floor deck.
Second floor deck. Several of them.
Yeah.
Many.
Again, these do not, that rear roof deck does not look out onto anyone's property. It's far enough away in combination with the 12 to 14 foot hedge. We will not be looking into anyone's backyard.
You have I'm sure from the existing structure, you're able to give us a radius photo. Oh, no, from the actual house, so that we can see the impact of the vegetation
Yes.
today. Is it mostly deciduous trees or?
There are deciduous, there are some evergreens, and the hedge.
Okay. All right. If you give us just a radius existing
Perimeter shot.
so that we can see exactly what you see and what your neighbors are able to see, and we'll see the impact of the deck, and then we can make a better ruling.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to go to the site.
Okay. Anything else, Brian?
No, I think it's fine.
Any public comment on the application? All right, if you could just get us that, and that way we can have a better idea.
Absolutely.
Just be prepared to
Can I-
challenge the stone.
Stone. Can I give you a photograph of it, or do you need an actual sample?
Of the stone.
The stone.
Of the stone.
I would bring a sample in, and I would prepare a heavy testimony on why you should have stone.
Okay. Thank you.
Are they asking to be
Are
adjourned?
you requesting this board to adjourn, correct?
Yes, I did.
All
Please.
right. Motion to
Motion
approve.
that we adjourn 101 Hunting LLC on 101 Hunting Street
There was no
per the
public comment?
applicant's request.
Sorry?
There was no public? Or they
No, I
heard-
asked. There was no public comment, correct? There's a
Second.
motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And last application for the evening.
Bringing up the rear. Hi. We're here about John, it's a house
Can
on
you give me
John
this?
Street, 45 John Street.
Is this the front porch?
Yeah, it's the front porch. We were here last year.
I hate to have you wait this long for that front porch.
Look, that's how it goes, you know, last time I think we were first. I think we need these documents.
Have you seen it?
We were here like 2 or 3 years ago to do a rear addition. So this is kind of the last step, is to redo the front porch.
Here.
So,
2 seconds.
It's really 2 seconds.
I'm Jerry Calderi, I'm the architect. I'm representing Roseanne Kamaniak, the owner. I think the last page of the drawings probably explains it best.
Right.
We chose to do an asymmetrical porch for 2 reasons. First, we think it looks best with the massing of the house. And second, it is basically, we've run out of allowable square footage. So,
Brian, you have any questions?
No, it's fine.
okay, thank you.
Christine?
No, I looked at it in the building department.
Any public comments on the front step or patio? Really walking. Motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the application of Roseanne Kamaniak on 45 John Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Do we have to put all this stuff away?
Most of that's garbage.
Yeah.
It's duplicates. What's left are the minutes from the 12th. All members present?
I'm going right now. Esther Dodson.
That's just not here either, anyway. All 3 of us? Everyone had the opportunity to review. Questions, comments, concerns, errors, or omissions?
None.
Motion to approve the minutes from the
I make a motion that
12th.
we approve the minutes from February 12th, 2014.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And motion to close this evening's meeting, please.
Oh, I make a motion that we close the February 26th, 2014 meeting of the Board of Architecture Review and Historic Preservation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night.
Good night.